Good evening, Wakefield. Welcome to the Town Council meeting of Monday, July 10th, 2023. Call this meeting to order at 7 o'clock. I ask my colleagues to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
For attendance today, we have all of our councilors present, with Councilor Dombrowski joining us via Zoom. Councilor Danahy, it's great to have you back in studio after the last few meetings and your travels. We'll begin today with public participation. I believe we have one member of the public signed up for comment. Sherry?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do. We have Rob Weddick.
Great. While we're waiting for Mr. Weddick to come over, just a reminder that we ask everyone to limit their comments to 3 minutes. Make sure you please state your name and your address before speaking. And while the council may choose to ask questions, we also may take your comments into consideration for a future agenda item or for a future meeting. So there won't necessarily be any back and forth.
Hi, Rob, can you hear us?
All right. Hi.
Hi, Rob. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how to turn on the camera. Unfortunately, I'm on a iPad that's new to me.
Oh, okay.
No worries, Rob. Thank you for joining us. Again, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address, and we'll let you go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much. My name's Rob Weddick. I live at 29 Walden Road, which is the cutoff between Lowell Street and Main Street at the head of the lake. We've been there for 38 years, 37 years. And I love I'm a bike rider and a walker and a rower on the lake. We moved to Wakefield because of the lake. So I feel that the highest priority, if anything is going to be happening along the lake, is to prioritize the sidewalks and parking. And if we can slow down the traffic on the lake and provide some sort of mitigation for the traffic speeds on the lake, I'm all for that. But the parking is used by hundreds and hundreds of people daily, and I think it would hurt the neighborhoods and hurt a lot of people who use the lake. So those are my comments.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Sherry, anyone else online for live comment?
No, Mr. Chair, that's it.
All right. I'll just remind our counselors as well, we did get 3 pieces of written comment. One from Marlene Veldwich expressing support for the bike and pedestrian plan, and also raising concerns about the lack of crosswalks on North Ave. Second comment from Theo Noel, also expressing support for the bike and pedestrian plan, and comment as well from Tiana Veldwich, similarly expressing support for the plan. All right. Moving on, item number 5 is an update and some recommendations from the Traffic Advisory Committee. Lieutenant Anderson, great to have you here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to be here. Hi, everyone. Lieutenant Joe Anderson, Traffic Advisory Chair. Traffic Advisory held a meeting on June 23rd, 2023, and we have 3 sets of recommendations for you. The first is Traffic Advisory recommends that a handicap parking space be approved for Crescent Street in the area number 43. That came from one resident in the area that has a handicap placard, but I'm being told that after being reviewed by the Wakefield Commission on Disability Issues, there are at least 2 that are identified in that immediate area. My memo to you had a slight typo, so I said the area is largely served by off-street parking. I meant to say the area is largely served by on-street parking, so there really isn't a whole lot of opportunity for somebody with a disability issue to have off-street parking and be accessible. As we know, the handicap spaces would be accessible to anybody with a placard, so I think in that area there's really no adequate handicap parking spaces available. So as a result, we request that Town Council approve that restriction for handicap space. In speaking with the DPW, that area also has some parking challenges since it is primarily served by on-street parking. If one vehicle parks a little bit further away from the one in front of it, it kind of reduces the number of spaces available. So DPW's plan is to line stripe those parking spaces to create a little bit more efficiency in the parking there. And I think, I can't say for certain how many spaces we'll get there, but I think with the handicap space and everybody parking appropriately, we'll probably maybe gain a space in some circumstances depending on how people park. So that's the first recommendation.
Great. Any questions from the council? All right. Seeing none, why don't we take a motion on that one before we get to the other items?
Sure, I move to accept the recommendation of the Traffic Advisory Committee that a handicap parking space be designated in the area of 43 Crescent Street.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Nope. Hearing none, the motion is to accept a handicap spot on Crescent Street. We'll take a roll call vote. Counselor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Counselor Danahy?
Yes.
Counselor Vincent?
Yes.
Counselor Smith-Galvin?
Yes.
Counselor McLean?
Yes.
Counselor Butt?
Yes.
And myself, yes. That's 7-0. All right, next up.
Thank you. I'm sure they're
This
happy
one might be a
about
little
that.
more involved.
This one definitely is a little more involved, and this is a recommendation to convert Salem and Pleasant Street from a two-way stop to a four-way stop. It would effectively add stop signs to both the east and westbound side of Salem Street. We reviewed some crash statistics, and we found a documented crash history there. The engineering division completed some sightline visibility measurements on Salem Street for both the east and west approaches. Neither approach met the intersection sight distance requirements, and in fact, a lot of them didn't even meet the minimum sight stopping distance requirements. That's kind of like the absolute, last ditch. Something comes out in front of your car, and you need to be able to stop in time, whether it's a pedestrian or a trash barrel or another vehicle. That's kind of the minimum distance that you would need to stop safely and not hit that object. It takes into account reaction time and things like that. So, we looked at these statistics. This was something that was presented to us by some residents in the area, and it seems like the safest thing for that intersection is to make it a four-way stop. And we looked at queuing impacts and a lot of things that would be of concern, but I would rather have a little bit of queuing there and maybe an occasional fender bender in the snow when a car might slide back a little bit on Salem Street, Salem Street, if they were heading across Pleasant Street. I'd rather have a fender bender there than some of the accidents that we've had. Fortunately, we haven't had any collisions with real serious injury, but we have had some with some injury there, and I think that this is identified as one of those intersections where a four-way stop would be appropriate. Four-way stops aren't appropriate everywhere, and I think there's a couple of reasons why you would need a four-way stop or a stop sign in general. One would be just to kind of let drivers know who has the right of way, right? If it's not clear, you make everybody stop. This is one of those instances where some traffic isn't coming to a full stop, and then on the other end of it, traffic that is coming to a full stop can't adequately gauge what's coming up on Salem Street. So because of that, we're recommending to make that a four-way stop. The statistics that we reviewed from Mass DOT were from 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 19. So pre-COVID numbers, those are probably the most accurate statistics that are available right now. There were 11 total crashes. Pretty much all of them were angle crashes. There wasn't really anything statistically significant about the time of day or any of that, but there was some injury. Three crashes resulted in non-fatal injury, and another 8 had property damage where nobody fortunately was injured. We fortunately didn't have any pedestrians or cyclists injured or involved in those crashes, but that's also a possibility there too that we want to try to mitigate. So 11 crashes in over the course of a few years, I think is significant enough for us to take a look at that. And my recommendation to you, as Chair of Traffic Advisory, is to make that a four-way stop.
Thank you. Any questions from the council? I have one question. As we think about the transition, if this does get approved, what kind of sort of temporary signage or what kind of measures would we put in place just to alert people that the stop is coming up? Whenever you make a change like this, I always worry that, folks that are used to what they're doing, just kind of blast through the stop sign.
Yeah, that's a very real concern, because that intersection has been a two-way stop forever, right? So for decades, people are used to going through that intersection, how they travel through it. But I would work with the DPW and make sure that there is stop ahead signs. I think even before that, there should be signage that indicates that the traffic pattern or the intersection has changed there. I think that what we would do as a police department is do some PR on social media and actually go and video the intersection and show the change. I think a lot of people are on social media now, so that would be an effective way of getting that message out. And then lastly, we would have officers out there to enforce that, initially with warnings, just to get the message across that that the intersection has changed. There is a stop sign now in all directions. So I think a combination of signage, adequate signage ahead of the intersection, some social media and some outreach, and work with DPW to see what meets the current signage standards to get that message across would be important, because it's been that way for quite a while. So it would be a big change, and people, as you know, kind of blindly go about their commute just expecting everything to be the same, and it isn't always the same. So,
Councilor Dombrowski and then Councilor Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Lieutenant Anderson. I just wanted to just underscore that this was introduced as a concept or idea from nearby neighbors, right? They were the ones that approached TAC on this?
They did, correct. So, I mean,
Okay.
initially, in some years past, Traffic Advisory had reviewed this intersection. I think some of the landscape, shrubbery, things like that didn't really impact the intersection as much. And I think they kicked around the idea with the statistics that they had at the time, and the crash history probably wasn't as severe. But I don't want to speak for the prior chair and the prior committee and what they considered at the time. But it was several years ago that they looked at this intersection, and at that time they didn't feel that it was necessary. I think based on that citizen's complaint and some others that we received from residents of the area, we looked at the statistics again, took some measurements, and at this point we think it is necessary.
So there's definitely been neighbor input then.
Yes, it has.
As a part of the process.
Correct.
Yeah, and then the all the four-way sign, there's four-way stops we have. They all have like four-way underneath the stop sign, right? So people approaching, no, I think that's the standard signage, right?
I believe it is. Yeah, the engineer's telling me it is.
And then with the approaches, I know that for some of the other, we've had new signage in our town or just across Massachusetts, I think sometimes, and maybe Mr. Renault can speak to this too, there have been almost like flags that will stick out of a sign to really draw someone's attention. So that's when you're talking about the approaching signage, those are the sorts of things we can be doing, right? And on a temporary basis, obviously, just to really make sure that people are tuned in.
Correct.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you. I think it's going to improve that intersection considerably. So I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Councilor Butt?
Yeah, just to echo a little bit of what Councilor Dombrowski said, I did want to thank Traffic Advisory to being responsive to neighbors. This isn't a sudden request. It's been requested a couple of years. Town Administrator Steve Mayo has a personal story about this intersection. So we've been hearing it a lot about this. I also am the liaison Traffic Advisory, but was unable to go to the June 23rd meeting, but do want to thank you, because I think we as a council respond to data, and you gave us all the data to show that intersection of why this is a smart idea. And then just to go on what Councilor Dombrowski said, in my hometown, and I can't find the street name, but they also created a four-way intersection on Lowell Street, and I can't remember what the cross street is. Do you remember, Steve? If you go down Main Street.
This is your hometown.
I know,
Come
I
on.
know. Where, yes.
The community in which you grew up.
Yes.
Yes, and that I drive through to get to my parents' house.
Lowell Street.
It's Lowell Street and Main Street.
And
I
Main
think it's
Street,
Lowell
yeah.
and Main,
Lowell
and
Street,
they
yeah.
created this a couple of years ago. It used to be the same, a two stop sign, and they made it 4. And Councilor Dabrowski had some ideas. They also, for months ahead of time, like they put one of those signs that like 4-way intersection coming up ahead. And I think that's something to think about too, putting some of those signs up. They really, it was a shift of people who were just used to driving. Now you go through and there were lots of near miss accidents there, so it's a lot safer, but just something else to think about. Yes, Main and Lowell.
Main and Lowell.
Yeah. By the golf course.
Go through there to Richardson's the other day.
Councillor Smith Galvin?
Distracted me with Richardson. Will there be crosswalks there as well?
So there are crosswalks there, but I think the plan would be to enhance those crosswalks and possibly do a traditional 4-way intersection with crosswalks at all approaches.
So the crosswalks are already there,
Okay.
but we're planning to do the ramps on the, what side would that be? That'd be the southern side.
Okay.
So the section up to where we paved, that is all upgraded.
Okay.
When we pave the next section of Pleasant Street, we'd upgrade those ramps too.
Okay. Thank you. I guess that's all I have.
I think the crosswalks are important too, because that creates more of an idea that this is a 4-way stop and intersection. I think that's
Yeah.
when you see an intersection like that, your mind while you're driving kind of is triggered to the fact that you're at an intersection.
That's what I was gonna say. If there's any paint on the road, I think that, especially new paint, people will also kind of slow down and think about that. And I guess I would just say after a reasonable amount of time, I do think that we need some enforcement in places around, and that can go a long way. Somebody sees somebody getting pulled over there after they're used to it. So I would really encourage, I know we're very nice here in Wakefield, but enforcement can be a very good thing.
I agree with both. We're very nice, and enforcement is definitely necessary.
Full disclosure, Lieutenant Anderson was out Friday afternoon doing some enforcement.
Nobody would have known, Mr. Mayo.
I know.
It could have been anybody.
I
It
saw
could have
it.
been anybody.
I was going to say, did you get a ticket?
No, I didn't, but I saw him.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, we'll take a motion on the Salem Street Pleasant Street intersection.
Move to accept the recommendation of the Traffic Advisory Committee that Salem and Pleasant Street be made a 4-way stop.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? No. So seeing none, the motion is to accept the recommendation for a 4-way stop at Salem and Pleasant Street. We'll take a roll call vote. Councillor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Councillor Danahy,
Yes.
Councillor Vincent,
Yes.
Councillor Smith Galvin,
Yes.
Vice Chair McLean,
Yes.
Councillor Butt,
Yes.
and myself, yes. So that's 7-0. Sherry? All right.
Thank you.
Next up.
Thank you very much. So lastly, the engineering division has been working to enhance our school zones in town, and this is something that's, as Councilor Smith Galvin knows, this is something that we've been working on for a little bit, not only enhancing the signage to either replace missing signs or enhance signage that may be in place in the area of some schools, but to kind of maximize that 20-mile-an-hour speed control distance in the area of our schools. So what the engineering division has done is basically extended that to the maximum distance allowable by law at this point. And they've identified in the packet that was sent with the agenda materials each school zone. So if you look at the first, Lowell Street and Vernon Street, the existing is in the yellow highlight. The proposed shows exactly how far that 20-mile-an-hour school zone would be allowed to be extended. And this is something that we can do on a town level, which is nice, that we can just approve this through town council as opposed to having to go to the state and Mass DOT. So that would be the first school zone. The next would be Albion Street and Broadway. Again, the yellow would be the existing, and the pink would be the proposed extension. The third would be North Ave and Main Street. So it would actually not only extend the existing, but update and provide a regulation for Main Street that's been approved here. The next would be Greenwood Ave, Oak Street, and Main Street. That would create quite an extension to the school zone there at the Greenwood School. I think that's another very important one. As you can see in the yellow, there's a very small school zone there that really wouldn't even be all that effective if we were to leave it the way it is. Next is by St. Joe's, so Gould Street would be extended to a degree up to Murray and past Cedar. Next would be Farm Street, Nahant Street, and Old Nahant. So that would create some extensions there. Next we have Parker Road. So you can see the extension there past Outlook all the way to almost Alpine Circle and a little bit beyond Eustis Ave. And then the very last page is what's current now for school zones. I think we're starting to see that with schools around the state, but this would effectively enhance the signage at all of our schools in Wakefield and bring them up into not only compliance but enhance the signage for drivers to see that they are in fact coming into a school zone. And I think that signage is something that we really need in every town, especially today's day and age. And that is the recommendation is to enhance those school zones to the distances that we just spoke of in the packet and provide the signage that is allowed by Mass DOT.
Great. Thank you. Can I just say I was shocked by the fact that we didn't actually have a school zone on Main Street in front of the Galvin. That surprised me.
I think there's been some signage in town that's kind of just been in place for a while, and it really doesn't do any good without an actual regulation. So if that regulation isn't in writing and the signs have been up for decades, that doesn't do us any good on the enforcement end. So when we talk about that enforcement piece, there may be signage in town that's outdated, and when we identify that, we try to get that replaced and voted on the appropriate way. But sometimes we find out the hard way that regulation was never actually in effect for many years. So we're doing our best to work through that, and I think the highest priority right now is our schools.
Thank you. Questions from the council? Councilor Smith-Galvin.
I almost want to give out like a standing ovation for this. Like,
Well, you can give it right.
well, and
right
to
over my
everybody, I know
right-hand shoulder.
everybody's been working really hard on this, and I know that the state has been in, and it was shocking, the before and the after, really, really shocking. And so I have no comments other than just to really applaud the effort on this. I think it's going to save lives, and I think it's going to make our town so much safer for everybody. So thank you.
Councilor Danahy.
Yes, thank you. This is great. I did have a question about the high school. Is that Oak Street, is that considered part of a school zone? I didn't see it on here, but it feeds into Old Nahant Road,
It wouldn't be, because it's typically on the street that
that the school's on?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just know that, I think there's been accidents there because it's a really tough road and to navigate, so.
Yeah, Oak Street is definitely one of those cut-through streets that
Yeah.
sees a fair share of speeding. I think unfortunately they can only extend the school zones so far, and I don't think it quite covers that, which is unfortunate because that would be good there. However, that is a 25-mile-an-hour zone already. It's getting people to comply with that
Right.
25-mile-an-hour existing speed limit, and that's again where enforcement comes in, as Julie said. And unfortunately, when the enforcement goes away, people kind of fall back into their habits. So it's something that we're definitely looking at traffic advisory.
And do the speed signs, like when you're since we have new school zones, do the signs saying, how fast you're going and how slow you should be going, is that effective?
Are you asking if those would be moved to match the school
Yeah,
zone?
just so that people start getting aware of where the school zone is.
So I think that the warning signage would be on the outer limits of the school zone, and then a lot of that your speed would probably stay roughly where it is right now. I think it is effective. I think it's effective in the school zones. I've seen mixed effectiveness in neighborhoods, like on Oak Street. Like you mentioned, we had some of those smaller signs that we move around town. I'm sure you've seen them and probably been maybe caught off guard by some of them, but in some areas we've had young drivers try to race those signs, which is the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. So everybody wants the flashing signs on their street to slow people down for good reason, but sometimes no good deed goes unpunished, so we have to move them. In that case, I had to shut them off. So we're trying to figure out a way to maybe calm some of the traffic there on Oak Street without having to have flashing signs that do the opposite. So we're looking into that.
Typically, anytime we're going to deploy, we're going to do a traffic study prior to make sure that there's actually not just a perceived problem, but a real problem. And then we do another traffic study after they're installed to see basically the difference if it's doing anything. So that's typically how we look.
Do you do the observation? Is that how you do, like,
No, we
observation?
typically-
Actually, Mr. Renaud, do you want to come up to the microphone? Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, so we would typically go through and actually either put out tubes. So we've done that in a few spots. Actually, we're doing that right now on Oak, as a matter of fact. So, yep. So we typically will deploy that. Our speed trailer also can collect data, so we have different ways to collect it, and then we use that as essentially a tool to determine what is the correct approach. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Councilor Smith-Galvin.
It's just on a related topic. I mean, all the studies show that like traffic calming is probably the best thing that happens around here. And we have a traffic calming policy.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's been posted now. And
Mhm.
has anybody
You know,
used it yet?
We've had a lot of interest in it, but I think the neighborhood
The
component.
threshold. What is the threshold for neighborhoods?
So it's
Like,
not even the threshold. I just don't think that nobody's even submitted the actual application
Okay.
to get it started. And I wish they would, because some of the informal success that we've had prior to having a traffic calming and parking regulation policy, some of the best success I saw in working with town council was exactly that, like kind of people in their neighborhood getting together to
Yep.
solve issues. And
Yep.
then we were able to work out some of those challenges ahead of time before presenting a recommendation to you and having all the answers, knowing that one side of the street wasn't going to be mad at the other side for having no parking
Yeah.
in front of their house and vice
Yeah.
versa. So I wish they would. If they have a concern in their neighborhood, let us look at
Challenge
it and,
accepted. We'll
and
find
rank it.
something.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I was going to say, Mr. Mayor, maybe if we could work with Jen McDonald on doing
Sure.
some promotion around that. Because I think we do get, as counselors, a fair number of kind of questions and comments that I know we refer to you probably more than you would like, Lieutenant Anderson, but I think it would be great if we can, make sure that that's out there, that there is a way to, investigate and explore some of these different changes.
And I do know that Mr. No has been very involved with the neighborhood over by the four-way stop sign on
Yep.
Green. And
Yep.
so, I mean, in a way, that it is kind of just happening
It is.
organically.
It is. So keep in mind the traffic calming policy that we have is very similar to a community's traffic calming policy that I used to work in. And I can tell you that was used frequently. It just here for some reason just they haven't applied, but we're
Well, I
happy
think it
to
hasn't
look
been
at
posted. We talked about that.
Oh, no, it's on the,
Is it- is it
it's on the,
posted?
on the
Okay.
Traffic Advisory Committee
I
website.
take that back.
Yeah.
Great.
They find my email address, so I'm
They
sure
find
they can
you, they
find.
can
Yeah,
find
I'm sure
that.
they can find that.
Right.
No, I would encourage people to get out, talk to the neighbors, and start that if they think that there is a traffic problem in their neighborhood, because the first thing that we're going to do is try to, number one, determine if there is an actual perceived problem, as Bill said, and if everybody in the neighborhood's on board with any proposed changes, because some changes are significant. It depends on exactly what the problem is, but if it's a speeding problem and it's significant, some traffic calming measures that might be suited for particular neighborhoods could be a big change to the neighborhood. So we need everybody on board with that too.
Councilor Dombrowski, I can't actually see you. I don't know if you have any questions.
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the council? All right, we'll take a motion then.
I just have one
please.
quick observation. It's off the mark a little bit, but when you get to Salem and New Salem, and you've got the plant and you've got the sign, it is obstructing the vision when you're trying to see people coming at you.
I totally agree with
on
that.
Salem.
I
Okay.
see that as well. So when
Okay.
we're repaving, we're looking at that.
Just had that happen to me the other day.
It
Thank you.
happened to me last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I
Councilor
have one
Smith-Galvin.
more- I have one more. Just because we were talking about schools and Councilor McLean's made me think about it. There are a couple of places, I know near the high school, I know where Greenwood, where there's bushes, like private foliage is blocking half the sidewalk. And like I've actually had to, somebody had to get off the sidewalk to go around me running yesterday. So I don't know who enforces that, but
Public
I-
Works.
I
Public Works, we
certainly
do.
think that within the range of schools, we should make sure that the sidewalks are completely passable.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm
if you have
happy to send you
specific,
pictures of both of them.
please do.
Can I
Great.
add one
Yes,
thing?
Counselor
Since,
Buck.
since we have both of you here, I think this is more a Bill question, but just reading the public comments from earlier, one of the residents mentioned the pedestrian light at the corner of Quinnipiac and North not working.
Okay. I'll take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that something that, yeah, we can get that fixed? That
Sure.
we had a lot of discussions about that a couple of months ago.
That's the one at the light plant, like in the middle of it, right? Is that the one?
Oh, I think
No,
it's
it's like
further
Powell
up by,
Parkway,
128.
Subaru.
This is corner Powart and
right by the Subaru,
north.
which might
Oh,
be a
by the
Mass
Subaru.
DOT. That might be a
Yeah, I
Mass
think
DOT
that-
signal there.
Mass
Okay.
DOT.
That might be Mass DOT.
Yeah.
I believe we may have referred that to them when we received the complaint, so I'm not sure. We should follow up with them and see
Yeah.
if that's been addressed or not.
If you could just keep us up to
Yeah.
date
Sure.
since it was in
Will do.
the
Yep.
public comment, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yep, we'll do.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Counselor McLean, you have a motion.
Yes, hopefully not school zone by school zone.
No.
I move to accept the recommendation of the Traffic Advisory Committee to extend the school zones and for the enhanced signage.
Seconded.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, other than just to say, again, thank you for the work that's gone into this and the other recommendations. I mean, I think that both this and the four-way stop are changes that will help make our streets safer. So appreciate all. I know this isn't just a simple thing that you come with. There's a lot of research and data collection that goes into each of these. So thank you to both of you and the committee for the
Thank you,
work
Mr.
here.
Chair. Thank you.
So the motion is to accept the recommendation to extend school zones as presented. We'll take a roll call vote. Counselor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Counselor Dennehy,
Yes.
Counselor Vincent,
Yes.
Counselor Smith-Galvin,
Yes.
Counselor McLean,
Yes,
Counselor Butt,
Yes.
and myself, yes. So 7-0, Sherry.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Again, great work and appreciate you coming today.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, item number 6. Mr. Renaud, don't go anywhere. Come on up, Ms. Kokinda. So we have a couple of agenda items in item 6, updates on the bike and pedestrian plan, on the 40A committee, which is the MBTA communities, as well as a more general community and economic development update. So we have these on the agenda really for discussion. I don't anticipate we'll be taking any votes tonight, but certainly hope to provide some good feedback. So we'll let you take it
Wow.
away.
I'm so happy to be here with 3 very different topics, but I'd love to hear your feedback, and that's why I'm here. So good evening, everyone. I'm Erin Kokinda, the Community Economic Development Director. I have some projects. I'm here with Bill Renaud from our engineering department, who has helped me with the first thing I'll be speaking about today, as well as a representation from the planning board as well. So I'm going to start off with the bike and pedestrian plan, and then I'll go over to the next 2 topics, 40A, as well as my community economic development report. So I know we're also joined by David Lutzenheiser. Lausenheiser. One of these days I'll get it. From MAPC. He's a senior transportation planner, so he's joined with us on Zoom. I did put a presentation together that hopefully we'll pull up in a few minutes. But while we wait for that. So this has been a few years in the making. Thank you for bearing with us, and we're so happy to be here tonight in front of you all. Here we go. So we're here tonight for the bike and pedestrian plan. To give you some background, we started this process in 2021 when Bill and I were discussing ways to improve our bike and pedestrian infrastructure in town. We brought on MAPC to assist in producing a comprehensive plan as a guide for policies and recommendations when making improvements to our roadways to make them more accommodating for bikers, walkers, and rollers. And just so everyone knows, rollers is a term that's used for wheelchair accessible vehicles. So the key goals in this report are to encourage, again, walking, biking, rolling to key destinations throughout town, whether that be schools, the senior center, town hall, commercial districts, as well as transit, which that plays in nicely with our 48 discussion tonight too. It's to establish a plan that connects to local destinations and surrounding communities through safe, comfortable, and convenient routes. And then also it's here to advance the town's complete streets policy. And just to give you some background information, that was adopted by the town council on September 11th, 2017. The purpose of Complete Streets is to accommodate roadway users of all ages and abilities by creating a transportation network that meets the needs of individuals utilizing a variety of transportation modes. So, take us back to 2021. There was a bunch of community engagement throughout this process. It all started back with some site visits to evaluate existing conditions. So this was organized by MAPC. There was 2 formal visits with town staff, representation from the Safe Streets Working Group, and key stakeholders in town. We had another one, so the first one was on June 28th, 2021, and the second was on March 25th of 2022. We also, in the fall of 2021, MAPC produced a survey, and we sent it out through many avenues, through social media, the website. I've sent emails out, digital posters, you name it, we sent it out, item, and we had received 360 responses. And some of those questions was just kind of getting the lay of the land. How do you get around Wakefield? What are your key destinations, which was highlighted in the last slide? Concerns when walking around Wakefield, concerns when biking in Wakefield, concerns when rolling in Wakefield. So that was one way, if you weren't able to attend the site visits, how you could kind of provide some feedback. Oh, wrong slide thing. And then we also had altogether 4 public meetings, if you include the Traffic Advisory Committee. Our first one was December 13th of 2021 with the public via Zoom. It was an introduction to the project, early findings. We had breakout rooms, which a few of us facilitated. We opened the discussion to the group, and I think we had a pretty good turnout for that one. I want to say around 50 or so
50 plus,
people there. Discussed next steps. So it kind of started the process for us, gave us survey. We were able to take some notes at that meeting. On June 24th, 2022, there was a presentation to the Traffic Advisory Committee, which they provided, TAC provided any feedback that they had, any concerns, and was brought back to MAPC and ourselves as well. July 14th, 2022, another public meeting, this was last summer, presentation to the public of the first draft plan. And I also should note, you know, this process has taken a little bit because there has been some turnover at MAPC. So the project manager before had left, and then we had to kind of rework the plan a little bit. But I just wanted to allude to why you're kind of seeing, you know, a year difference between the July 14th meeting and the June 8th, 2023 meeting. During that time, Bill and I were working closely with MAPC to kind of make some tweaks, changes, recommendations of what we'd like to see, what TAC recommended, what some of the other public members would like to see. And then we just had our last meeting, June 8th, 2023, with the public via Zoom. And it was the final presentation of key goals and highlights. So after our public meeting, survey responses, reviewing past Wakefield plans, Vision 2030, many of the other plans that we have. MAPC was able to draft a report with policy and project recommendations. 2 of the policy recommendations, which are, they're infrastructure, but not anything really to the, well, I guess they are to the roadways, but any significant changes to the roadways was, the first one was bicycle parking. And what they recommend is we require short and long-term bicycle parking in all and any new multifamily development, business and retail construction. And I know we've already started implementing that in many of the projects that have come forward already, which has been great. Recommending long-term parking be covered, so that could be somewhere at the transit station. That isn't something we've really done yet. Maybe at a well-utilized spot, maybe around Lake Quantapowhat, anywhere where someone could be there for a long period of time. And then the plan also recommends specific locations. So schools are called out, commercial districts, library, commuter stations. So that was one recommendation that they had in the report. The second was crosswalks and sidewalks. So they recommend ladder-style crosswalks as opposed to parallel lines for optimum visibility at all times and reflectivity at night. I mean, I think we all know maintenance of crosswalks. Putting pavement beneath the pavement marking so it lasts longer. And then when it comes to sidewalks, and it goes into more detail in the report if you've had a chance to read it. But with sidewalks, I know Bill's group has done a great job of doing a sidewalk inventory. So we have a whole map now, which you can find in the report too, of places where we're missing places of sidewalk. And we are, through this report, prioritizing based on what pedestrians can currently access. If there's sidewalk on one road already, 2 roads, missing spots, and that's how we'll, gaps, yep, that's how we're going to prioritize it. So now I'm going to hand it over to Bill, who's going to talk about project recommendations.
Sure. So before I jump into the recommendations, I just want to kind of talk about how I envision this plan and how we would look to use it in the engineering division. So, if you've been on our interactive website, you know that we kind of stick everything into 3 buckets. We have a planning bucket, we have a design bucket, and we have a construction bucket. The planning phase is typically a project or an area that we've highlighted. This, this can be from any of our asset management condition assessments that we've done. So we have asset management condition assessments for sidewalks, for roadways, for utilities, water, sewer, and drainage. And we use all of these to identify areas where work needs to happen, all right? So I envision this honestly as more of a plan that's identifying locations that I need to go to and do some type of pedestrian improvement, sidewalk improvement, etc. When we get into the project design phase, that's typically when I'm going to go and take, I'm going to do more due diligence to figure out whether, we'll do surveys to understand what the, what we can actually fit within the location. We're going to look at doing testing of the pavement or looking at certain specifics, elevations of different things. That's when we look at all of that, and that's when we're going to decide essentially what that treatment would be, how wide things would need to be, and how this would work. So once we get that point, we're typically going to do some type of public outreach. So if it's a small thing where I'm doing like an infill sidewalk, that would be something where I just go to the neighborhood and talk to the neighborhood and explain, you have a stretch here that doesn't have a sidewalk, we're looking to put a new sidewalk across your property. Other ones that are larger, we come to you. So that's happened on a couple of projects. So our North Ave project most recently, I was here, I believe, in probably around March or so, I believe, as we were looking to finalize the design of that and put it out to bid. I also was here back about a year and a half ago when we looked at the sidewalks on Albion Street and the bump outs, because there was some parking that was going to be removed to kind of make sure that we were dovetailing that with what the council thought was important for other priorities. And kind of, because obviously with all of these types of things, there's competing priorities. There's competing priorities between walking, biking, and just regular car and transportation stuff. So that's typically how we handle that. And then we go into obviously the third phase being the construction, where we're actually doing our bidding, our contract award, and then constructing it. Again, there's a lot of public outreach at that point too. So we'll go out, let folks know before we start when we're going to be on the street, what we're looking to do again, and timings of when they can expect to be interrupted, whether it's getting in and out of their driveway, whether it may be utility related, but that's kind of how we implement these projects. So I just want to make sure that we understand planning level is a high level situation. So we're not making decisions with this plan on any type of treatment. There's recommendations that MAPC has provided us, but whether or not those work, we're not going to know until we do the survey and we actually start to get into design. So, so the bigger part of the recommendations, and I'll focus a little bit on the biking recommendations, because I think that's probably the one of the more controversial issues. So really what MAPC is giving us is kind of a 5-tier system to look at the types of the type of bicycle and cycling accommodations that we can do on a roadway. As we go down each rung, we get a little bit less safe, and it's a little bit less comfortable for some of the younger users to use these spaces. So starting off, we have shared use paths. So we have some examples of a bike trail similar to what we're constructing now in town. There's also on-street, shared use paths, and that's something that we're going to be proposing in front of the Galvin School as part of the Envision project. So these things are going to be separated from traffic. It includes an ability for users, for all users, to use this type of path. It also allows for two-way traffic on it, so it's a little bit different than what you typically would see for a wider sidewalk. We have it striped so that folks can either pass if you're in a bike to get around some of the slower users, or you can go and just use it in both directions so people can see each other. So, it's definitely probably the most safest because it's separated, but it can be separated by a bunch of different ways. Second one is a protected bike lane. So that's going to be protected through either a curb, flex post like we proposed on North Ave, concrete barriers, which some communities have done. I'm not really a big fan of those per se, Or park cars where you put it on the passenger side, so the top right-hand corner of it, where you're using the parking to help delineate it and keep them away from from the traffic adjacent. Third one would be the conventional bike lane. So that's really where you're just providing either a buffered strip, nothing vertical to delineate you, or just a 2 lines for 5 feet of bike lane for you to drive within. The fourth being one way, so in areas where we're constrained and we can't make a bike lane in both directions, we can look to do that in one direction. And that's something that I envision us having to do a lot within the town. So look for parallel streets to go one way, another street to go the other way. This is a good example. This is Washington Street in Brookline, if you've ever driven on that road. That has a one-way bike lane that I just happened to have driven on recently, so it came to my mind to give you an example of it. And then the last piece is shared streets and sharrows. So those are areas where essentially we're going to allow bicyclists and pedestrians potentially to share the space. So low volume roadways where you don't have sidewalks. Top right hand corner is a good example. Where you're in stretches that does it make sense to put a sidewalk in there? Probably not, because it may impact trees or the look of the street. And you're going to allow everybody to kind of be within the street, and you're looking for everyone to essentially share it because it's such a low volume road and it's not as dangerous. We also look at sharrows on streets, and we think those are most suitable on residential areas and residential streets. Where we can't get the bike lanes or the sidewalk improvements, we're looking to do that on low volume roads as well. We have in town used them on major streets pretty consistently, and I think that's kind of what we're trying to shift from. So we have sharrows pretty much everywhere throughout town in different sections that have been identified as high bike areas. But what we're looking to do is to kind of keep going up that rung or tier to get to the safer accommodation, essentially, is what we're looking to do with the plan. So jumping in from there, so this is a very busy slide, and I know you can't read it, but it is in your packet. So this identifies, essentially it gives us, let me see, what do we have? So a total of 46 locations for different bicycle accommodations or improved sidewalks or intersection improvements. They're based on the resident feedback that we received in our survey, as well as some of MAPC's analysis, where we asked them to focus really on where we would want to have transportation as a second mode to get back and forth around town, and then also to provide the connectivity between different things. So a good example would be connectivity from the Greenwood School to the Maple Way Playground would be a really good example of that, where we don't necessarily have that. So that's kind of the process that we did to come up with this plan. Again, I look at this as areas to go look at and design, and if there are major changes, we would be before you to talk about those. So anything that would take parking, we'd be back before you. Anything that would have significant reallocations of roadways, we'd be back before you for that. But if I'm striping a bake line within the existing pavement, I would probably just move that forward as part of my paving program. So let me turn it back over to Erin. She'll talk a little bit about how this plan connects to other networks within the region.
So Bill and I have been, MAPC has kind of been spearheading this, been attending a meeting once a month with State Senator Jason Lewis's office to organize this regional network, the Mystic Highlands Greenway. So we're working with the communities of Melrose, Stoneham, Malden, and Reading to develop a safe and inviting corridor for walking and biking between our communities. It is meant to connect trails, town centers, transit, and parks. It will connect the Malden River Path to also the Tri-County Greenway, Lynn Fells Parkway, Wakefield Linfield Rail Trail, and Lake Quannapowitt. So you can see here on some of the maps, again, I know it's very small, but it was in your packet as well. The Mystic Highlands is really starting down in Malden, and we're trying to make that connection here up to Lake Quannapowitt. Most of it is all on the roads. No major changes as we're presenting now. It's really basically wayfinding at this point, maybe some sharrows on the road, using side streets, but just trying to promote to the things I mentioned just a few minutes ago about trying to connect to kind of the rail trails, the Tri-County Greenway, also Lake Quannapowitt. And then we also have Reading now part of the conversation, and how do we make that better connection between Reading and under 95 to Lake Quannapowitt. I know I've seen many people standing there walking across, and it's a very uninviting corridor there. So they have been looped into the conversation as well as Mass DOT. The second one is the Lake Quannapowitt Loop. So this is the loop around the lake that we kind of briefly talked about, that Bill kind of talked about. It's really to enhance bike and pedestrian access for users around Lake Quannapowitt. In this report, it recommends a 12-foot wide path around the lake to alleviate conflicts between different users. Bill and his team have already started the North Ave, which he mentioned before. That will begin construction August.
Mid-August.
But how do we make those connections, as well as Quannapowitt Parkway in front of 200 Quannapowitt, and then that Main Street area to make it more user-friendly for all, as well as Floral Way now is another way that people can access it as well. The other two is Breakheart Reservation Spur. So this is connecting from our downtown to Nahant, to Farm Street, to Breakheart, as well as the schools that are there as well. So how do we make better connections there to the rail trail again? So as you can see, we're trying to make all these different connections from east, west, north, south on the roads. And then also the last one is the Wakefield Linfield Rail Trail, which you are all very familiar with. Again, that is hoping to be open sometime this summer as well.
Yep.
But again, all these regional plans are hoped to build into this larger regional network. And I know the Wakefield Linfield Rail Trail is part of the Border to Boston Trail, and will hopefully eventually connect to New Hampshire. And 50% of the trail is complete. And so that's a kind of a large overview of the bike ped plan. Again, I think we both want to reiterate that this is, again, policies and recommendations. Any big projects will be coming in front of you again with the elimination of parking. I think the smaller projects, that's part of some of the work that Bill's already doing. But it's trying to accommodate all users of all ages in many ways. So we are here for any questions, feedback, concerns. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation and the work that's gone into this. Obviously, we know this didn't just happen. This was something that, has been in front of the public a number of times. You've solicited a lot of feedback, so appreciate all the effort. Questions from the council? Councilor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair Chines. Bear with me, I had dental surgery earlier today. Sure. You don't get a smile like this without extensive dental surgery. I asked you the questions in advance,
Yep.
But I want to go over a couple of them here today. I'm impressed with the plan, but I do have some process questions, and I'm going to drill down, and I'm using that word on purpose, about the recommendation to eliminate all parking on Main Street side of the lake. How many parking spaces are currently available on the Main Street side of the lake?
So they're not currently striped, but we approximate about 185 that
And-
are in the areas that you can park. So it's not the whole length, obviously.
Right. And do you have plans for any new or additional parking?
So there are some. So we have about 49 spaces included within the 200 Quinnipiac project. So there's some public spaces that are part of that. So public and visitor spaces there. There's also increased parking as part of the Envision project. So Envision has 14 additional spaces on Common Street and another 14 additional spaces on Lake Street being proposed. So we have some plan to replace some of them. So that would still be within the immediate area of the lake, so people could use that as alternative parking locations.
The next question I have, I know that MAPC made a presentation to the Traffic Advisory Council on June 24th, 2022. I took a look at the meeting minutes from that meeting, and two members of the TAC expressed concerns about the parking being removed on Main Street and what impact that may have on folks who live on the streets that intersect with Main Street.
Yeah, so I re-reviewed that meeting again today, before the meeting, just in case that was, this meeting, just in case that came up. So what we recommended, well, I wouldn't say we recommended, what we did is we provided feedback to MAPC and Erin. But the big piece, the takeaway was that what we don't want to do is make sure that those spaces don't get transferred into the neighborhood. So there may be a need for some type of additional signage. That was really what the discussion was, and it focused around that.
And is there plans for MAPC to go back and make an additional presentation to the TAC, because that hasn't been done since June 2022?
No, at this point, no. I don't think that we didn't really leave it that way. They had mentioned that potentially doing a parking study to see how that would work and how it's being used. Again, I think the other piece is that, you know, there are times when most, if not all of those parking spaces are used for big events. And, you know, I think we would have an ability to design the project to have a removable flex post or something to that effect, if that's what we're doing, to allow the bike lane to be used for parking on certain days when it would be, you know, it's really necessary to facilitate whatever's going down in the common area. That being said, there's also, if you know, the council doesn't desire to have all the parking removed, the parts of it removed, we can, you know, I'm sure I can come up with some solution. What ends up happening is a trade-off. So, you know, there may be a smaller grass strip on the neighborhood side. There may be a need to remove a sidewalk in a section and kind of send them across to the new shared use path that is being proposed. So that would be kind of how we would do it. But at this point, I don't have full survey, and we haven't looked into it to that level of detail. We typically do that once we're moving forward and we have a funding source and, you know, we're ready to make this project happen. At this point, we don't have a full funding source for the project. We've gone after a bunch, but we haven't been successful yet.
And is the MAPC initiated or have plans to initiate that traffic study?
That would be a separate initiative,
Yep.
so we would have to get funding for that.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. The last two sections I have on this is Wakefield had a Wakefield for All age-friendly 2021 action plan. Has that been taken into consideration? Because I saw on your list you had the master plan, Vision 2030, other initiatives that were listed in there, but I specifically didn't see the age-friendly plan. And the reason I mention that is because the plan does say that the town should ensure that the needs of older adults and disabled individuals are considered into programs, I would submit, similar to this.
So that would have to be a question, David, I don't know if you could hear us. I don't know if the woman that was working on the report before looked at it. I would hope that the Council on Aging was familiar that we were doing this process, but I don't know if, David, do you happen to know if that report was looked at?
I recall, but I would note that as part of the plan that we're, you know, the improvement of crosswalks, the improvement of sidewalk conditions, that was a key concern amongst the survey respondents. That benefits all ages and all abilities, and by having, you know, smooth transitions between the street and the sidewalk is important with the crosswalks and the curb ramps. So those are being addressed or recommended in the plan.
I think you'd also build into the tiers that I was talking
Yeah.
about. So we're adding, you know, higher tiers for some of these accommodations, right? So there's a wider shared use path that folks can walk on that provides more area for them to get around. If they have, you know, walkers or they're in a wheelchair, you have all those types of things that are available to them to be able to be used. It's pretty tight right now if you're walking. I'm sure everyone has. So everybody knows that the sidewalk needs to be wider. I mean, we just have too many folks that are walking it. So.
And I think too, with the Council of Aging report, I think too, the Complete Streets kind of hits on that we're creating these accommodations for everyone. And when we did the survey too, we made sure, you know, I know you census information as well, that we're taking into account all populations and demographics with this plan.
And that was the last question I had. The updated July 2022 Census Bureau information says that 18% of the Wakefield's population is 65 and older, and 6.3% of the population under age 65 is disabled. That's almost 25% of the town's population. So one of the other questions I had is, did the MAPC have an occasion to consult with the Commission on Disabilities? And I know you sit on that as well, so you answered that in the affirmative.
Yeah, so you know, as a disability coordinator for the town, you know, I give a monthly update to the Disability Commission, and as part of one of my updates, I had mentioned that this bike and ped plan was going on. It wasn't anything where we brought the plan specifically to them. We said, hey, this is going on. If you're interested in tagging in, you're welcome to it, and that there's a survey that's available, all that type of stuff. So.
And what
That's
about
how
with the
it
Council on Aging? Has
What-
anyone from MAPC or the town had an opportunity to specifically sit down with the Council on Aging and talk to them about this plan?
Not as of yet, no. We were presenting to you guys first and then getting comments and feedback. But prior to that, I don't know if MAPC sat down with them to provide us any feedback, but I know the survey was shared to many people, so.
And I ask that because I know that a lot of the older population does go and avail themselves to the lake, because I'm part of the older population and I do use the lake. But I also know that those that lack mobility do enjoy the lake by being able to sit in the confines of their vehicle
I get
and
that.
read the paper, read a book, have a cup of coffee. And there's concern in the community about that losing that ability to do that. And that's why I
And-
want that taken
yeah.
into consideration.
Yeah, and this is it's a plan. Again, it's policy and recommendations. We will take a look and we will talk before we move forward with any projects to any populations that it would be affecting and make the appropriate changes that's necessary.
I mean, I take this as feedback. As I
Mhm.
get
Yeah.
into the project eventually, we can look at alternatives. I'm hearing loud and clear that there's some need for some parking down there to remain.
Yep.
It's pretty easy.
I
to
appreciate you
accommodate.
answering my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Butt?
Hi, Bill. Can you pull up slide 14 a little bit?
Oh. Do you guys mind pulling up the PowerPoint?
Sorry.
We do have
Steve and
Ed-
I,
we have
I just,
Ed.
I just, it was the slide with a lot of great information, just a little tough to read. And so if you could just walk
Oh,
us
yeah.
through, because these are the decision points coming
Oh.
up, right? So what does the first colored column say?
The color comment says priority. So there's
Okay,
low,
good.
medium, and high.
You were right.
I would say.
You were
Yeah,
right.
Low, medium, and high, and then we have cost. That's low, medium, and high.
Okay.
Right, and then there is the project description, the type of project that it would be.
Okay, and what do the colors on project description mean?
Oh, that's a good question.
I believe.
I believe blue is bike.
I think blue is, bike lanes, and then orange is sidewalk.
Yep.
Green is the shared use path.
Yep.
And so I think blue is just all bikes accommodations in general, and then orange sidewalks, green shared use path.
And it's in your packet. There's, in the
We
thing. but,
still
yeah.
can't read it very
Okay,
well
so
in our
let us-
packet. If we
We'll
could-
blow
if
it up
we-
for you
why
guys.
don't we
if
blow
you
it
could
up
blow
for
it
you?
up and
Yeah.
give it to us,
can
that'd
do
be
that.
really helpful because I tried zooming in and it's
Yeah,
just,
we'll blow
it's
it up for you.
hard.
Well, to be honest with you, I had to
Because
zoom
these are
into
the-
it myself. So
These are the decision points, right? So for us, eventually you'll come back here with some of these, and so it would just be nice to have a better understanding of
Absolutely.
of
we can do that.
priority cost and then what the description is.
Yep.
And then when you do come back, this was great. I love this. When you do come back, I also would love, there was ARPA money for sidewalks.
Yep.
And so how does some of the funding that you already have, as you're trying to get more funding, tie into some of these
Yep.
priority and cost estimates?
yeah, and that is included in there. So I'll give you the blow up. It does talk about that.
Awesome.
So,
Great.
yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
So as we've been doing this for a good, a year and a half now, 2 years. So it's been a while, and in between, as
We've
we
been applying.
identified the locations, we came to you folks for the money for the sidewalks. So it
Yeah,
kind of
great.
dovetailed with what we're doing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Councilor Dombrowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation and for all the hard work that's gone into this, certainly. I guess I look at this from a slightly different perspective because I think that the idea of having kind of overarching policies could create some problems for us because I think we need to be a bit more nuanced than that. One, in looking at the master plan itself, it was pretty clear that there was more of an urban focus to it, and the plan actually directs to the urban street design guide, which is actually created by the National Association of City Transportation Officials, right?
Mm-hmm.
So looking around Boston, I work in Boston, so I'm there in the city often. I think there's a lot of creativity that you can do, or a lot of adaptability that you can do in Boston or another major city. You can't kind of drop into Wakefield. And I know, Mr. Renaud, you talked about this to some extent, recognizing that there's almost a scaling, if you will, of what is possible here. But I think the other piece that throws me a little bit is I was supportive of the North Ave project because it really created what seemed like a multimodal path. It was wider and it didn't impact vehicular traffic or any parking for that matter. And then we get to looking at the other side of the lake, and I have for years run that side and thought to myself, gosh, there's all this the dirt footpath is a pretty good indicator that in fact we need a wider sidewalk. I've talked to Mr. Mayo about this for many years. But I think that the idea of removing close to 200 parking spaces is just a bridge too far relative to multimodality. And I'd like to see how we can re-examine that. And I know that we don't have a project in place right now, Mr. Renaud. So that's something that you're going to obviously be doing perhaps at some point in time. But I think we need to be thinking about, all right, well, how can we take into account that parking there is significant for a number of reasons. For folks that are differently abled and need that, for our elderly population, folks who do just want to park there. There's a lot of reasons, and I understand that. And I am concerned about the overflow for all of those streets that are perpendicular to Main, as you mentioned earlier. I think that is a reasonable concern that those residents have. They don't want to have a bunch of cars suddenly parked there. But I'm not convinced that Wakefield is or will ever be this kind of cycling centric community that these sorts of guidelines or this sort of I'll call policy mandates would be appropriate for. And I think part of it is just the natural flow of our town is a function of it being a bedroom community 10 miles north of Boston, as the master plan points out. And inherent in that is we can only retrofit to a certain extent. And I know, Mr. Renaud, you do a really good job where you can, but I'm cautious to want to have too much of the emphasis be on dedicated bike lanes, because I'm not convinced that that's going to be, or that is now, I know it's not now, and I don't believe it will be a primary means of transportation. So when we're talking about very limited real estate, especially along the lake, for instance, I think it's too valuable to make sure that we're not utilizing it for a use that would be to the greatest benefit of the most amount of people, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I think that what we're talking about, and that does just being an example of taking out 180 parking spaces, dropping in a bike lane to cater to, I think, frankly, a very small population. And if you look at the survey, there are 360 respondents. Over 100 of those respondents responded affirmatively to 6 of the 12 questions. So I think it was somewhat of a self-selecting group. And I don't think 360 respondents in a town of over 27,000 is necessarily representative of town sentiment in terms of transportation. And I support, multimodal transportation. I support our cyclists as well. And I recognize the safety. But the Safe Streets Working Group, who is often mentioned in the master plan, is, I've worked with them. I think they're a really committed group, but they're diehard cyclists. And I think that, their passion and their commitment to this perhaps may have outsized a little bit the what the demands or the reception would be in the community at large. So I would just encourage that. From all that I've been hearing from folks generally, even if we go back to the Envision project when we first talked about it, there's always like a question of, all right, well, multimodal makes sense. Dedicated bike might be taking it, in certain areas, might be taking it too far if it's at the sacrifice of something else. And I don't think we can be demonizing motor vehicles, especially in a community where, that's how people realistically do most of their shopping, do most of their travel, because it's how you have to get around. And so I'm really cautious about, putting too heavy an emphasis on policy directives that I don't think are necessarily compatible with what our topography or our population or the desire of our town is really looking for. So thank you.
Councilor Smith-Galvin?
I'd like to disagree with most of what Ed just said. Though I definitely understand where a lot of this is coming from. I think that this is a situation of change is hard, and allowing for safer streets for bicyclers, and it's not just bicyclists, and it's not just recreational, is something that people are going to have to experience. I cannot tell you how many people say to me, including some of our fellow officers in blue, I can't believe you ride around the town. It's so dangerous. This really, number one, is a safety issue. And of course nobody's out riding their bikes because we have our streets are 100% designed for cars right now. And I think that as a community, we need to it's not an either or, but right now it is an either or. It's an all cars. And until we demonstrate some infrastructure where bicycles and bicyclists, people, we're talking about our neighbors, can safely ride, where you can send your kids to school and they're going to be in a protected bike lane, we're never going to see a change. And so I really caution this council to not take an all or nothing approach And you know, I think we're going to have a really great demonstration with the North Ave project. That although I see it's in green on this map, I'm pretty sure is a protected bike lane, right, Bill?
Yes, well, we have a shared use path and a bike lane.
And a bike lane, but
Yeah,
there's
we
going to
both.
be a bike lane there. I think it's going to take some time. Change is hard. It's going to take some time. I guess I disagree a bit with the premise that we are a bedroom community 10 miles from Boston. I mean, we are 10 miles from a major metropolitan area where, as you say, Ed, you work there. I work in Somerville. You know, I would say, you know, 90% of the streets that are well traveled now have bike lanes, and people are using them and they're coming. I went from my house to CVS yesterday, you know, 1 mile, 9 kids on bikes, 9, and I get that it's summer, but there are kids out there, and when, I know we're talking about the older population, and I absolutely believe that we can find places for people to sit in their cars and enjoy the lake. That does not include that parking, because that parking is not, nobody's used, I mean, other than events, very rarely are 185 of those parking spaces being used. I just really think, you know, we're a community of about 26,000 people, 21,000 registered cars, according to a survey that came out, or a new database that came out from the town, or from the state last week. And actually, that's going down a little bit. And I think that we have the opportunity to reduce congestion, reduce traffic, while making our streets safer and frankly saving lives. So I know we're a long way from the decision on that, and I think there will be compromises to be made, but I really implore the community and the town council to keep an open mind and to, you know, to look at some alternatives like this that have been proven. There's a lot of research out there that's been proven that these save lives.
Thank you. Councilor Dennehy?
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of bike paths, but not to the extent, and I do think that change is hard, and I think it's a good thing for our community. I think it's a good thing for children. I think safety is really important, but not at the sacrifice of one population. So I don't want to see populations being pitted against each other. And I'd like to say, I mean, I look at like, especially the lake, I look at things that are important to me is safety, access, and aesthetics. I want it to look good. I want everybody to have access to it, and I want it to be safe. The parking is there. I was just trying to think of just creative ways that we could, instead of taking away that parking, is there a way like inside, so we'd have parking and then inside have the bike path and then the sidewalk.
Or
so
vice versa, I think is
Yeah.
probably what I would look at, but it all
We can
depends
like
on the- it all
taking
depends on the
some of
right-of-way
the
width.
green away
Yeah.
from the lake, so that,
Sure.
I mean, the lake area is big, but then people, so think about it as, you know, you identified parking places for people, but if somebody is in a walker and just wants to go for a little walk around the lake,
Sure.
wants to walk down to a bench, if they're parked in a place that's not really convenient to get there, it's going to be really difficult for them. So can we move into
We'll take a
that?
look.
I think we definitely could take a look. Again, you know, I look at this plan as providing me locations to look to improve.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean that what's recommended is what we can go with. I mean, I can tell you right now, on some of the projects that we're looking at for our roads program, we couldn't fit what was recommended.
Right.
So, you know, we had to neck down to a 1-lane bike lane in a
Right.
section, and then it goes away because it turns into a Sharrow because I just don't have enough right-of-way width. So
Right.
those types of things happen, and that's how I expect this to go.
Yeah.
I'm going to look at the recommendations, start there hopefully, and see where we end up. But I'm hearing loud and clear, don't lose the parking on Main to the maximum extent. Is that what I'm hearing, or to some degree? I mean, we can look at alternatives. I'm happy to do that. But I think we're a ways away. It's probably a big piece to
Yeah.
keep in mind.
Yeah.
There's nothing
Yeah.
imminent. I have no funding. I'm probably shy about to do anything out here. Probably $3.5 to $4 million.
Yeah.
So that's a big number. So
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're just making sure that our lake is probably our most valued asset in the town. And I want people to be able to ride around the lake safely. But I also want people to be able to, what I've heard is people be able to sit and enjoy the lake, and if that might be in their cars parked so that they can get out and not walk very far, because we do have that part of the population as well. So, and then I had another question, like some of the things that you showed us for the curbing, like the curbing, the flex posts, the
Yep.
concrete,
Yep.
parked cars.
Yep.
What's the reality of doing it? It was like plantings. Like I love that. Can
Where's
we
this?
do
The
that?
bottom corner.
The curbs.
Oh, the bottom left hand? Yeah, that's, I mean, that's.
I mean,
cool.
that, like, I think that looks really nice.
Yep.
And I think it protects bicyclists.
Yep.
I don't like the bike paths that there's no barrier between.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, we're doing
cars.
something similar for the Envision, at least the current sketches, that's where we're at. I mean, keep in mind, we're at pre-25 design from SDOT, but, and we're looking at 2028 for that to happen, but, yeah, we're looking at that as an option. So,
Okay,
yeah.
that's great. And then my last comment is gonna be, is that I think that if you want people walking and biking places, is that there needs to be kind of a destination to go to, and I think that's part of the Envision project, but I'm just gonna give a little, Greenwood is not very walk-friendly. It's
Yeah.
because the sidewalks are narrow, because we have the telephone poles. Parking is not great. And, I mean, what is the plan to make that area walkable and rideable?
So
Because
there's
right
some
now,
area-
it's
there-
not.
There are a couple areas that are recommended for improvements, but I think, you know, you hit it on the head. But the big issue is that in order to make it compliant, you'd have to lose a lot of trees. So I'm guessing, you know, mature trees is not something that we want to be taking down.
We could lose telephone poles.
That's a different discussion with a different department.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
yeah, and we have done it and worked with them on certain sections. So
Mm-hmm.
if that's something that the council wants to push, I think that, you know, we'll definitely support it on our end. But that's not a decision I get to make, unfortunately.
Right, right.
We'd lose
And
some
then-
parking as well, wouldn't we, if we had to widen it?
If you had to widen it.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's tough, because the parking is, but I don't know if there's any way to, but that I think is really important too, is that if you lose parking, if people then gonna be able to walk more. It's a denser, and with 40A, it's gonna be more dense, so
Right.
that you'd wanna, I think, work on a strategy to get people to be riding and walking.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
And it's super close, Greenwood's tight.
Yeah, and specifically in Greenwood, I think we can also look at the driveway aprons. You know, as we're reconstructing sidewalks, we can widen them out so you have at least some crossing spots that are wider. I've done that in the past
Yeah,
in areas that I had constrained right away. So that's the type of stuff that we're talking about. You know, the recommendation is a 5-foot sidewalk. We know we can't fit it in places, so we come up with other solutions. So.
And then with downtown, and I think I know, the plan is to make the parking parallel, right, rather than
Not
the way-
everywhere, no. And
not-
again, this is the feedback of taking the feedback from what we hear. We ended up having a section that still is head in, but the issue is that you need to have an area to back out that's clear from the travel. So we developed a design that does that in sections, and then other areas where we couldn't accommodate that, we went, because with the right-of-way narrows, we had parallel. So,
Because Main Street's so wide, that seems perfect for bike
in
lanes.
sections, it does narrow out in parts, so, you know.
Vice Chair McLean.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As the only member on the council who is part of the 18%, and who managed to have his own dental surgery last Friday before 9 holes of golf, which was against medical advice. I find myself somewhere in the middle here. Not an uncommon situation, but I understand the comments process-wise from Councilor Vincent, and I understand the comments from Councilor Dombrowski. I do have a few questions and maybe comments, more questions really, but you know, I've read in the materials that we have you know, a situation where we adopt a plan and then there's public participation. And I know there's been, and believe me, I'm not being critical. You guys did everything you could to get out there over the years with surveys, but I understand the concept that now we're getting the, wait, what? Reaction, because people are starting to see what might be coming. And I'm in tune to that. I think that we should have a robust debate throughout the town over anything we do. I noticed, for example, Bill, that there should be a priority of sidewalks on both sides of all arterial streets. My question to that comment would be, does that mean on the other side of Main Street, we're gonna have a full sidewalk?
We would envision that happening, if we
Yeah.
could fit it though. But see, again, now we discuss, if we're looking at parking, that might not be the case. So I think it's trying to balance all of these, and I think I said earlier, we're talking about competing priorities and competing interests, and
Right.
so,
Right.
you know, trying to find a balance on it. I'm hearing loud and clear that we want to find some places to park.
Some
and,
happy medium.
You know,
Yeah.
that might mean that sidewalk stays not installed and not completed, but we focus and get people across the street safer.
Right.
Because right now, there aren't really good crosswalks through there. So that
No.
could be that can be the compromise.
And when you say a protected bike lane on North Ave, it's not a barrier that's solid cement protection.
No, we're not, Public Works isn't a fan of that. And so
Yeah.
I've talked to Director Conway about that. That's how we had the removable flex posts, and we're not even doing it where we drill it into the pavement, because that affects the pavement condition over time. We're looking at, you know, essentially those similar to what you see in the crosswalks that say, you know, yield to pedestrians, something similar to that,
Yeah.
but within the hatched area.
And we can't actually get an pedestrian activated red light halfway down there or down around those new buildings?
The pedestrian activated, yeah, well, we talked
I mean,
about that.
I'm not talking about flashing lights.
Yeah.
I'm talking about
Yeah.
pedestrian activated. You can cross now because people
We-
don't always pay attention to people.
Like anything
when
else,
they're driving.
it's money. It's money for that project, and,
Right.
you know, based on the size of the project, it would be about 50% more than what the cost of the project was.
Is the Greenway funded? Is that something that's going to be Commonwealth funded, do you folks know? Or is that
The Mystic Highland
participation by
Greenway?
the communities and
The
us?
Mystic Highland one?
Hmm?
The Mystic Highland Greenway?
Well, the Greenway work that we would be doing here, I'm reading about items going from Chestnut Street to Jordan to Fox to
Oh,
Emerson
yeah,
to
so
Boone.
that, part of that has been funded. That huge thing, again, is gonna be going through side streets, and a lot of it's wayfinding. And so a few communities
Sharrows.
and Sharrows have been funded through a grant most recently. We didn't want to apply with them until we had the approval of this plan.
So you could have a Sharrow on Jordan. It's not widening the street, it's not
No,
You
no.
got it.
doing
Yeah.
anything except putting a Sharrow on Jordan or
Exactly. And wait-
Chestnut or some other
Yeah.
Exactly.
street, and signs saying, here's how
Yeah.
you stay on the path.
Exactly.
Here's how you stay on
Yeah.
the Greenway.
Exactly. I think that's the idea, kind of going to Council Dennehy's point too, about context design and understanding where you are and what works. I mean, that doesn't make sense to have a bike lane that goes
have no
across
idea.
all of the
Yeah.
frontages of these houses and you can't park in. That
Right.
doesn't make sense. So we wouldn't propose that.
As the Main Street rendering, which I recognize does have some angle and some non-angle, has that been, presented to the business folks down there that would be
Oh, yeah.
Envision.
impacted
Yeah,
by it?
we had, I want to
Is
say.
it being perceived
how many
positively?
meetings
Do
did we
you
have?
know?
That was prior to me.
There was five,
Many,
there
yeah.
were five public meetings on that, maybe
Yeah.
more. It
Yeah.
went through the council as well, so, yeah, that's, and there hasn't been, so there still is a final public meeting that we have to keep our funding. So
Mhm.
there's a 25% design public hearing. At this point, we're targeting sometime in the fall for that to happen, so.
Are we moving towards having digital readouts, 18 seconds, 17 seconds when you're
Yep.
crossing? Because
Yes.
one of my favorite intersections at Church and Prospect and North,
Yep.
I go the one way and it's got 18 seconds. I look parallel and there's a red hand up.
Yeah.
So are we moving towards getting all those synchronized?
That's a different project I would be looking at. So what we've been doing with most of the projects that come in from developers is we get a mitigation payment for what we call like the aggregate traffic impact. All the traffic studies say they're gonna work, they may have to do specific improvements, but we also take a pot of money to look at more signals townwide. So what I'd like to do is to cobble it together as a Mass DOT tip project for several intersections, to have them all talk to each other, and to make improvements on the infrastructure that's there.
So that's TBD.
TBD probably within the next 3 years is what I'm
So-
envisioning for that.
When we have something pending like storm drain work on Lake Quannapowitt, is that impacted or delayed by all this that we're talking about? Is it affected at all?
I would say I would dovetail the two of them together. So we have some funding from the 200 Quinnipiac project. that
Do
they
we have the
provided.
1.3 million in hand?
Not in hand yet. It will
Okay.
be coming. But when we have that in hand, I would probably sit on that for a little bit until we figure out where the curves are going to align, so that we only do this once. I don't want to do it twice. So
So and a lot of these do have funding, and as Councilor Butt was indicating, some of them are ARPA funded, and it'd be nice to get a blow up so we can see what's actually going on. But also, you're saying that there's a lot of funding here, 3 to 4 million, that we just don't even have yet.
You got it, yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, we'd have to obviously decide on a game plan as to what we want it to be, and then I'll price it out to see, you know, how close to that number it is.
Right.
Depending on what we're doing, it could be, you know, if we're keeping curb lines where they are, that's a lot cheaper. I would expect that we wouldn't do that.
Right.
So there'll be some added costs, you know, to obviously move curbs.
And just to be 100% clear, I think what you're saying, and I want to make it clear, is that even if we, at some point, vote as a town council to adopt a plan, that is not cast in stone. It's going to be subject to
Evolving.
coming back in and discussing this and discussing it with the people in the community before this town council actually makes a vote.
Yeah, I think the only projects we wouldn't bring back is if I'm just restriping in a, you know, on a road that doesn't have parking or something that just, you know, part of my paving program, and I can fit things in, I'm going to do that.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
those would move forward without coming back here.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Just a couple of questions, and I think this has been a great discussion. I hope, you know, you've gotten good feedback and information that we can kind of take back to continue to refine this. First question is, you know, as we do talk about the lake, we've talked about, you know, 185 parking spots along Main Street. I think I have seen, and I think everyone has seen, that it is a rare day when all of those spots are occupied. And so as we think about, you know, kind of balancing these different uses of the street, and I think we've all highlighted that, you know, there are a lot of different uses we've got to balance. It would be great as to, you know, when we start working towards a plan for Main Street, if we could actually do some parking censuses, whatever the plural of census is, just so that we understand, like, what is the problem we're actually trying to solve? Because if only 50 of those spaces are occupied, I think my preference would be I don't want to overbuild parking to fulfill a need that exists only, you know, 3 days a year for 4th of July and Festival by the Lake and things like that.
Yep, fair enough.
So that's one question. The second question that Councillor McLean kind of alluded to is sidewalks on both sides of the street for major arterial roads. As I look at the plan document, major arterial roads is really only defined as a couple of streets, and so it would be great to understand what we're talking about when we're talking about both sides. If I read the document, it doesn't suggest that that would include, for example, Lowell Street and Salem Street. Whereas those are two streets that I would argue probably should have sidewalks on both sides. So if we could get some more detail on that, I think that would be helpful, because, you know, to the extent that we can avoid people crossing streets like that if they don't need to, that's a safety thing. And then finally, the last question I wanted to ask is, from a timing standpoint, do we have projects that we are holding pending the completion of this plan? And from an approval standpoint, you know, what would be the timeline that you'd be looking for to, you know, kind of get, you know, shovel-ready projects started?
No, at this point, no. I mean, we have the sidewalk improvements that we talked about that was approved through ARPA. Those are in design phase right now. That's pretty straightforward. I don't think that's a huge reallocation of areas, so that's something that we would just move forward with. It really would come down to, you know, maybe the Main Street project as the next one, but again, coming up with $3.5 million, we're going to need some grants somewhere. I've applied for a ton. We haven't been successful. So we've gone after earmarks. We've gone after a slew of different approaches to get the money, and unfortunately just haven't been successful yet. So, and I say yet. So
I was going to say, I would assume too that the approval of a plan also adds some oomph to those grant applications.
absolutely.
and those
definitely
earmark
does. Definitely
requests.
does. Yes. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Great.
I mean, I'm happy to move forward with some concepts for this area if that's the council's wish. You know, we can definitely move forward with that, and if that's what you'd like us to do.
I think, again, I want to make sure we understand these are two separate issues. There's the plan itself, or there's the plan itself, and then any particular project proposals. So I wouldn't want to hold up the plan for some of those discussions. Again, I think you've heard the feedback that, you know, we want to be mindful of balancing uses. I think there's a lot more information we need to really understand how we do that in a project plan, but that is sort of a later issue. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn for the council when I say you probably do have a lot of support for widening the path along Main Street. I think we all know that that's a challenge.
Yes.
Sorry, Councillor Danahy, you had one other comment before we move on.
Yes, I was just wondering, how does the master plan get into, the overall master plan get integrated?
So I think a lot of the things that we have talked about tonight, the bike ped plan, through the policies and recommendations, are a lot of things that have been brought up through the master plan as well. When we did the transportation part, the whole multimodal, how do we get around town with different, different uses, also single occupancy vehicles, how do we get more of those off the car, but also how do we best accommodate cars as well. So kind of finding that balance. But I think a lot of the things that we talk through in this plan are highlighted as well as part of our master plan and also in our Vision 2030 plan as well. I think there's a lot of overlap there.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. So again, we've given you a lot of feedback, but I hope this was helpful.
Definitely.
Thank you.
For this piece of it. I'll ask my colleagues as well as members of the public to continue to share feedback, and I anticipate that we'll have you back either in August or September to continue this discussion and hopefully kind of put something to a vote for approval.
Great. Thank
Awesome.
you so much.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Bill.
you. All right. Ms. Kakinda, I think we're
I'm here.
we've got you again.
I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I get to miss bedtime, so I'm one happy camper right now. I'll be here all night.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you very much.
And I know Jim Hogan's going to be joining me as well through Zoom. I don't know if he's on yet.
Yeah, he's on right now, Erin.
Okay, awesome. I couldn't see you guys. So yes, moving on. I think this kind of plays in nicely with the discussion we just had. I'm here to talk about, kind of give you an update with Jim on our MBTA Communities Multifamily Overlay District. Again, the point of the MBTA communities, or 40A, as you also hear, is to create housing near transit, and the bike ped plan, as we were talking about in our downtown area, how do we get people out of cars and use bike ped and connect to the train? It all kind of ties in nicely together. So the project team for this is myself, Community and Economic Development Director. I'm joined by Jim Hogan, who you can't see, the Planning Board Vice Chair, but I kind of call him the chair of this MBTA Communities Working Group as well. We also were able to receive, and I apologize, his name's not on there, grant funds to have a consultant, Ezra Glenn. I know I mentioned that last time, from PPRI Consulting, and we got those funds from Mass Housing Partnership. And then our working group after we last met, we were able to put it together. So we have Julie, who is representing the town council, Jim Hogan and Matt Lowry from the planning board, Greg McIntosh from the zoning board of appeals, Robin Greenberg from the environmental sustainability committee, myself as the internal person. And then after you guys mentioned to us that you'd love to see a resident involved, we had Matt Bone. He's a Wakefield resident, a fairly new Wakefield resident, has expressed interest on a few other boards, and was interested in being part of this. So again, the purpose of this meeting is to answer any questions related to the multifamily zoning district under consideration. Solicit feedback from you guys. This is based on the MBTA Working Group Committee and Ezra Glenn's work over the last 3 months. As a reminder, the 40A is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They passed a law that required communities to pass a multifamily zoning district. And MBTA communities shall have at least one multifamily zoning district of reasonable size in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right. We currently do not have that. Zoning is required to be in place, but multifamily zoning district does not guarantee additional development. I just want to make sure that's clear. Existing regulations, for example, setbacks, are still enforced as part of this process. So the requirements from the state level, multifamily districts shall support a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre. The minimum size this is based on 15 units per acre. It shall be 114 acres. Be not more than a half mile from a commuter rail station, have no age restrictions, be suitable for families with children. 10% maximum affordable units are allowed. Minimum multifamily unit capacity is 1696, and the minimum land area that we were given, or the minimum multifamily unit capacity for Wakefield, is 1696. The minimum land area for Wakefield from the state is 36 acres. And just a reminder, as part of this process, site plan review is still very much like we have it for special permits, part of this process when people come in. And that's something that we are talking through as a group right now, what that may look like. So just wanted to give you a development context of what kind of housing we're trying to create here in the Commonwealth. It's that missing middle housing. We're not looking to create the mid-rise that you see all the way here on the right. We're not looking to create more detached single-family houses. We're trying to create duplexes, townhomes, triple-deckers, courtyard building, kind of, I think Jim said it best, gentle density within our transit stations. So I know we showed this slide last time, but I think it's a good way of showing the type of housing that we're looking to create, the Commonwealth's looking to create. Oh, wrong one again. And so an example of what that may look like in Wakefield is 49A Chestnut Street. This was completed in 2022, 3 units, 6,978 square foot lot. If you did the measurements, it would be 18.72 units per acre. We use this as an example because it's a fairly new project, and it did go through GIS variance and special permit to allow, it went from a 2 to a 3 family. And so we kind of use this as a discussion as part of our working group on how we were looking at housing. If we're not looking for kind of that higher density that we're seeing at Grayson Lofts and Foundry Street, where can we kind of look at this middle housing here in town and what that may look like? So I'm going to pass it over to Jim. I don't think you can see him, but he's kind of give you the overview of kind of where we met you guys when we presented to you back at the beginning of the year and where we're at now with the process.
Thank you, Erin.
Yep.
Before I dive into the specific process, a couple other things I wanted to highlight. Just for, I think members of the town council may be aware, but for folks who are being introduced to this for the first time, the state, one of the reasons why they indicated that they passed this law was a perception that the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, is approximately 200,000 housing units short of what has been needed to keep up with population rise in the past number of decades. And that's the reason why they're trying to induce not just Wakefield, but the entirety of the communities on the MBTA lines to produce more of this housing around transit. And additionally, the other thing to keep in mind, we can get into it later in terms of some of the sticks that the state has provided, but the Attorney General Campbell has indicated that this is not to be taken as an optional compliance mechanism from her perspective as the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So with that being said, we at the planning board and in conjunction with engaging with town staff and other members of the town council took this as, you know, the intent for the leadership of the town was compliance was going to be the method of how we're going to address this new requirement that's coming from the state. With that being said, the planning board has had a number of question and answer sessions to try to educate the public of what this Section 3A zoning was. In December, January, and February of this year, we reached out and engaged with town council previously, as well as the planning board, zoning board of appeals, environmental sustainability, all kind of in that same early 2023. And then look, based on engaging with each one of those groups, we're able to assemble this working group that has met 4 times over the past from April till now, and is in the process of trying to work through what would be a good starting point to present to this body, as well as the public, and hold a series of public forums in conjunction with the planning board in order to start working towards a compliance model and a compliance zoning district. The requirement for the state is that to have this zoning district in effect by the end of next year, so December 31st of 2024. The way that we've been trying to manage this process through is to have a actionable zoning ready for spring 2024 in order to present and give us the ability, if needed, to push one town meeting to fall, but still be in compliance. So Aaron, if you want to pick to the next slide. So the working group, as you can see in this photo, we met in person twice, and then we switched over to Zoom when we had some issues with recording at a quality that we really wanted to make sure that we kept in order to have the proper level of transparency. But all of the meetings that have been held and recorded have been posted to the planning board's website in the specific MBTA communities website page. And the process included reviewing the regulations of the MBTA Act, mapping out potential zones of zoning compliance for equity within the town. We, as a town with 2 commuter rail stations, have the ability to choose where we would like to have our overlay district that would be in compliance with the state. For some reasons we can get into in a little bit, we ended up picking the Wakefield Junction based on some of the dimensional constraints that are imposed on us by the state law. And then in addition, we looked at what was the right size and the right approach. One of the things that Aaron mentioned earlier was that the state mandated a minimum district of 36 acres, but in order to comply that, we would have to have a significantly higher density than is allowable by right than what the surrounding area is. So if you look at that 36 acres versus the 114, if you take the minimum density of the 15 units per acre and spread it out over our allotment of housing that we had to zone for. So the 36 acres, you'd have to, triple or quadruple the amount of units that we're proposing to be allowed as a right in order to have that small of a footprint. There's a number of those type of dimensional games that you have to play, and kind of math games, for lack of a better term, with this law. With that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to Aaron to review the Wakefield mixed-use overlay for some additional context.
So when the working group got together, we really started with these 2 maps as well as our zoning map. I didn't include our zoning map here as kind of a starting point because, as you know, the town of Wakefield already has the half-mile multifamily mixed-use overlay already. So we use that as a starting point and looking at different streets, areas that we thought would make sense. And we're able to kind of draw out ourselves of, we think this area, would fit in, this area would fit in, both in Greenwood and also the Wakefield station. We were able to then, once the mapping was completed, we decided that the whole idea of middle housing and what that looks like within these within these areas, and kind of staying in tune with that neighborhood feel that we already have around our transit stations already, minus Foundry Street, which has kind of been that more, larger density buildings. So we plugged in the different streets that we picked out, and Jim will go more into, where we ended up with where we were within the working group, what we decided on. But the state has put together this compliance model where you plug in all the data. So you put in all the dimensional regulations, you put in all the GIS data. They exclude public land within that model. They exclude wetlands. So you have to plug it all in, and then they exclude it for you, and then they push back these numbers to let you know how many dwelling units you'll have per acre, how much land is excluded, how much is non-conforming. So we did that with both Wakefield Station and Greenwood, with the areas that we chose. And with that being said, Greenwood came back with what we decided on was doing, I'm going to go to the next slide, doing 4-family by right. And when we did that within the Greenwood station area, it only gave us 11.8 dwelling units per acre. So for us to meet that 15 dwelling units per acre within Greenwood, and even be an average with our Wakefield station, we would need to really go up in density, whether that be 5, 6-story, 6 units. And we just thought with the character around that already, and also protecting our commercial districts, that we didn't think that was the best thing. So we decided to do up to 4 units per lot. The maximum lot coverage is, these are all the numbers that we plugged into the compliance model. 35%. The minimum lot size is 4,000. Building height can only go up to 3. Maximum building coverage 35%. Minimum open space required 30%. Maximum lot coverage 35. Parking spaces per dwelling unit, this is still a conversation that we're having, is 1.5. And lot area per dwelling unit is 1,000. And then the setbacks are 15, 10, 10, and 20. And we pulled this actually from the mixed-use multifamily overlay district. I think something, and then Jim might talk about it a little more, is something that we were very aware of is, again, this was created the state created this for housing. They did not have anything to with mixed use within that mix. So we wanted to be very protective of our already commercial districts, both in downtown and Greenwood. So any mapping that we did, we excluded for Wakefield Station, we excluded Albion, Main Street, any North Ave, any commercial corridors in there, and then Greenwood, same thing, Main Street. Because I don't think it would happen, but you would hate for that to happen. That people come in and have a multifamily present. I mean, not that you would hate to see that, but lose that commercial frontage on our main commercial corridors. And so we really did make a conscious effort to draw around it. With that being said, in the back of our mind, we were like, well, we still have this mixed-use multifamily overlay district where, the applicant, if they would like to do that in our downtown commercial districts, still would have to go in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals and still would be able to do those projects. So I just wanted to kind of give you what our mindset was once Jim explains it a little bit more. And so, Jim, if you want to go into the Wakefield Station and how we kind of ended up here and explain in a little more detail.
Yep. So as Aaron referenced, when we looked at some of the dimensional requirements of the state law, we determined that Greenwood would not be the best way for us to proceed as a community because we'd have to allow 5 or 6 units as of right on these lots. Additionally, when we looked at it, we thought a good basis for at least starting the conversation would be to, for lack of a better term, copy paste all of the mixed use overlay dimensional requirements. I think one of the things that's a little bit outstanding that we probably would like to engage with town council, frankly, on is the parking ratios, that 1.5, if that's the right number. I think there was some interest of members of the working group to lower that, but there was a fear that may or may not present a challenge in terms of leadership within the town wanting to maintain that ratio. I think we've heard from some staff members at that town, there may be some interest in actually going lower than that 1.5. That's our current basis of parking within the town. With all that being said, we focused our energies on Wakefield Junction. You can see on the map right here, there are 5 districts, A, B, C, D, and E. If we were trying to, just to answer the first question I'm sure will come up, if we were trying to meet the bare minimum for compliance with the model, it's likely that we could get away with a district that's basically 1A, B, and C. There's a couple slight nuances that we're still working our way through. We actually received some guidance from the state as recently as a week or 2 ago in terms of making sure there's enough continuity within these districts. So we're still working through some of the details, but essentially, if you wanted to get the absolute bare minimum, you could probably have sections 1A, B, and C and still pass muster with the state. With that being said, the working group, we thought that it made sense if we were going through this rezoning effort and we were trying to increase that gentle density around our commercial corridors, around Wakefield Junction. The state is mandating that you are half a mile from commuter rail, but we perceive that there's also some quality transit along via bus along Main Street. And so we thought that the 1D and 1E could be a good additional sections that we thought would be good policy and good thoughtful growth in terms of where the town could add, these as of right 3-story max. So it's materially consistent with the existing housing stock that we have in a lot of these districts. 4 units max, which, especially in the 1C and 1A areas, there's already some multifamily that's existing. So it wouldn't necessarily be this huge increase in density. And so we thought that there was a good likelihood that this would be a way for us to increase the number of residents who live around our business in the downtown area without really materially changing what we perceive as the neighborhood character of the neighborhoods. And so we thought that it would make sense as a town trying to be thoughtful and proactive to add sections 1D and E in order to help spur some of the additional economic development within our downtown areas. So if you go to our compliance model, what does this all say, right? And this is very small. It's in your packet, but I'm sure
we can make this bigger as well.
Yeah. But basically, if you take all 5 of these districts and you combine them together, instead of the minimum of approximately 1,600 units that would be allowable if you demolished every building and rebuilt as of right from this model, you're up to about 2,300. And we are at a density that's about 16 units an acre in lieu of the absolute bare minimum to comply with the law of 15. So we're slightly ahead in terms of the size of the district. In terms of the density that we're actually permitting, it's actually pretty low compared to the minimum that the law has. If you want to go to the next slide, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see, this is probably a better summary of it, but it's that 1696 from the minimum for the multi-unit capacity. We have the 2,300. The minimum land area, we're at 145. So it's slightly higher than that 114 if you just took the minimum number of units at the minimum density. And then we've got, we comply with all the other ratios that are being mandated by the state. And I'll turn it over to Aaron to kind of outline some of the sticks that the state has included in this law if we choose not to comply.
Yes. So just as a reminder, I know Jim just talked about the Attorney General, but I know the state has already gone to some communities that have not wanted to be in compliance and taken away funding opportunities. But if we do not comply with this, in which we are all in compliance right now, we would not be eligible for funding from the Housing Choice Initiative, which I will be talking about in a little bit, the Local Capital Projects Fund, 3 MassWorks infrastructure programs, and other discretionary grants. And Wakefield has received $3.6 million from these programs over the past 3 years. Other discretionary grants, in my mind, too, could be a lot of the different grants that we've also received recently. And so I think they put that there kind of like, well, it's that, they decide what grants you won't get. And that if I can, speak from an internal person, these grants have furthered a lot of different activities that we have done in the town. So it'd be a real loss to the community if we did not have the opportunity to have those grants. And then, Jim, I can't, were you going to talk about this, the Greenwood?
Yeah, I'll pick this back up. So I think we referenced earlier that Greenwood was one of the sections that we looked at in terms of a potential spot where we could have a overlay. Just, this is some backup information. You don't need to get into the weeds, but basically what it's telling you is that the densities at the 4 units allowable as of right, it's 11.8, which is under the 15, which is why it's not eligible, or we don't perceive it's eligible unless we significantly increase the density to ratios that we feel are not consistent with the neighborhood character. The reason why we included it in here is, one, to show our work, but also it also brought up a question that I think we would like to get some feedback from the town council. Regardless of if we're doing this for the state, we on the working group committee have had a number of conversations. We feel as if there may be value in having an overlay district that could be presented to the town that would allow multifamily housing as of right around Greenwood. Maybe not the 4 units, maybe it's 3 units, but we could have that as a multifamily overlay district that we could do because we think it's a good idea, not because the state's forcing us to do it. With that being said, there was a question, because that would be a discretionary zoning ad in nature, of whether or not the working group, whether this body felt that was appropriate for the working group to be pursuing. It's materially consistent in intent to the, this was an outcome that was communicated as a possibility as part of this MBTA overlay zoning, and it was the intent of the working group when we first started. But because of the particularities of the law, it wasn't viable from a compliance perspective. But we would be interested in having a conversation with the town council whether or not we thought it was a good idea to pursue it anyway, and we could make it more tailored to our needs as a community, even if it would be a potentially discretionary additional zoning overlay that would not be submitted to the state for compliance. And then lastly, just in terms of next steps, so the working group, we feel as if we're getting pretty close to a map. We got to work, as I mentioned, to do a couple nuances with the law to nail down some maps. And obviously, if the town council has any feedback, I'll take that to the working group and make sure we incorporate that to the balance of this process in the summer. This fall, the MBTA working group, once we're complete with our work in terms of the initial zoning proposal, the intent is to bring that to the planning board, back to this body, ZBA, Environmental Sustainability Committee, all the committees that working group members are a part of. Get feedback from those groups as well as any members of the public in those forums that we can do. The planning board, and talking to my other members on the board, have expressed a lot of interest in having a number of opportunities for public comment through the balance of the fall. The intent is sometime late fall, early this winter, that we get an actual draft bylaw to the point where we could potentially refer that to the bylaw review committee as part of their work. Make sure that we're not going to be doing a bylaw and then having a number of rewrites at the last minute. Incorporate all of those different elements, represent to that as everyone as appropriate in the spring, and then make sure that we're ready. So Springtown meeting, we're ready to vote on the district in order to make sure that we have compliance with the state. So I know that's a high level summary and there's probably a lot of questions. There's a lot of detail in here, so I'm more than happy to take any questions that the town council may have at this time.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayo.
I usually don't like to jump in ahead of time, but I do want to say that I want to thank the committee and Erin and Jim in particular and Julie. A very thoughtful look at this whole process. I mean, this was a kind of got passed by the legislature over the objections of the MMA, and we really were brought into the fold, and I get that, that's fine. But I think it really looked at, and I love the term gentle density. I think it was really with a thoughtful approach of trying to maintain the characters of the areas and the residences, and then really looking at that middle area. So I'm really very appreciative. I think you guys did a great job in really flushing this all out and doing a great presentation. So thank you for your hard work, all of you from your team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, and I do want to echo that. I mean, this also clearly represents a lot of work. I've participated in some of the public forums that the planning board has held, and they've been really impressive, really helpful and thoughtful conversation. And so appreciate the effort, the thought, also the analytics that went into all of this. I have to say, I probably will be coming back to you, Erin and Jim, with some questions on some of the tables in here to make sure I'm looking at them correctly. But again, appreciate all the work that went there. We'll open it up to comments or questions from the council. Actually, Councillor Smith-Galvin, I don't know if there's anything you want to add as our
not a lot.
liaison to the committee.
I echo everything that Steve said and you said. It's been a really thoughtful working group. I have learned a lot. We spent a lot of time looking over maps, thinking about what we want the community to look like. I do think that the items, particularly the parking minimums and a couple of others where we had some robust conversations, but I do think it's something that really needs to be talked about seriously at the council level. And because parking seems to be the theme of the evening, but it's what people care about, and I get it. So, yeah, so that is it. I think we have a really, this has been hard work, but I think the harder work is to come to explain this to the community. It's not easy. There's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of models that can go different ways, and so we're going to really need all hands on deck when we do get to a point of making sure we can get this through town meeting. And frankly, whether spring 2024 is, whether we might even be able to do it earlier than that. Jim, I can't remember why we said maybe not earlier than that, but maybe we can talk about that timing.
I think the reason why we determined that the fall of 23 wasn't likely is we didn't think we'd have a time to have a proper public engagement and then make any edits if and when we thought that they'd be appropriate, especially given that a lot of the time between now and the fall town meeting is summer, and we perceive that there's going to be a lack of the ability to engage thoughtfully with the community between now and fall.
Absolutely, and considering how quickly fall is coming,
Yeah.
I do recall that
I think the
conversation.
educational piece is really important
Yeah,
to the public.
absolutely. Yeah, I do think that is going to be the toughest piece of this, and we need to, distill some of the messages and work with some of our really excellent communications team in town hall on that.
I think the one thing I'll mention too, as I was working with Gail Conroy today, and we were curious, we talked on Friday about how many, special permits and variances have gone through to convert 2 to 3 over the last basically year and a half. And there's been about 3 to 4 altogether, up to that 4-unit threshold, which I thought was kind of interesting. So I just thought that was some data that you guys would find that has gone in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals. The one that you saw here is one of them that's on that list as well. But the other two were actually within that Emerson, I think the other one on Cedar, the one at the end of Cedar as well. So
Great. Other questions from the council? Councilor Dombrowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Hogan, and Ms. Kokenda as well on this. This is super helpful. I think that this working group has a pretty unenviable task in that the 40A is this really odd unfunded mandate that's a one-size-fits-all for all 175 MBA communities, and it's with complete disregard for projects that are in process, projects that have been developed in the last few years. If they've been approved already, then they don't count towards all this, which I know makes it very difficult. So I have tremendous respect for the work that the challenges you were presented with in doing the work you did. So thank you for that. I know that you're using the 49A Chestnut as an example. What you hear a lot about when discussions of housing is affordability. But if we take that building for as example of one of the units in there just sold 17 days ago for $750,000. So I don't think that's not achieving the idea of creating greater access to affordable market rate housing, or maybe that's what market rate is, unfortunately, for folks. So I think that that's a challenge, because when you look at that 49A Chestnut, it's a rather imposing building on the property. The area is comforted by the fact that there aren't a lot of other buildings just like it. But if you were to line several of those up along the street, either next to it, other side of it, behind it, then I think you really, I think, Mr. Hogan, you're spot on in talking about the character, but I think inherently you are really changing the character of these neighborhoods considerably. And I don't know what the solve is for that, and I don't turn to this working group to have it, but I think it's something that we have to be mindful of. And I guess that brings me to the observation of, I think at this point, we should obviously comply with the law, but not go beyond it. And if there are worthy projects that someone is looking to do outside of what is required under 40A, then I think they should be taken on a case-by-case basis first as a matter of right. I have been to too many on-sites where we've had 40B projects, and people at the on-sites, people on this council have repeatedly said, when are we at the 10% so we finally have more control over things? And I think that at a point where we see from 40B how much neighbors especially want to feel like they have more control over the design process and the development process, I think that the notion of us voluntarily ceding control is one that doesn't sit well with me, because I don't think we should do anything as a matter of right beyond what we have, between the overlay district and what we're talking about here. I think then, again, if it's a project that is appropriate and the ZBA feels it's appropriate, then it'll be approved. But this idea of the 40A is talking about setbacks of 10 feet on either side and 15 feet in the front. That's not a lot at all. And you put several of those lined up one after the other, it really changes the character of almost any neighborhood, I think. So those are my thoughts. That's my input as a counselor. I understand that really 40A needs to be changed. That's not what the working group can do to make it a little bit more customizable for communities, especially those that may have more densely populated areas. And I also think we have to just bear in mind that along Main Street, especially, it's still important that we have a vibrant commercial corridor too. And so that's where I would say that if ZBA was looking at something like insisting that we have retail on the first floor of anything that ends up on Main Street, especially in the downtown area, that to me is important versus just saying like a 3-story building that's all residential, because we don't want to lose that tax base. And also we want to be able to really encourage the economic development side of things. And so I'm not in favor of expanding down what we're required to do by law. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up question on that. If I'm looking at the map on slide 27.
Oh, okay.
It looks like the proposed zones would not include frontage on Main Street, North Ave, Albion Water, kind of all of those commercial streets. So if it's kind of small, so I'm trying to see, but
so-
it looks like we'd still have basically
Absolutely.
business permit in those immediate sort of
Yes.
front streets.
And that was at the forefront of any discussions that we had and kind of Foundry Street got brought up into that as well,
Okay.
is protecting our commercial districts, but having this infill development around it to support our commercial districts. On Main Street, North Ave, they could still go through the special permit process for the multifamily mixed use with the Zoning Board of Appeals, where you would get that affordability component at the 18%. But yes, the whole idea was that we wanted to be very protective of our commercial
Got it.
districts.
So the concept would be sort of the zoning change would be effectively like the block behind those major commercial
Absolutely,
arteries.
yes. Mhm.
Sorry, Councilor McLean.
So, Councilor Shines, if I
Oh,
may.
sorry,
um,
please.
As it relates to that commercial corridor, what we've talked about, what we haven't finalized as a group, is to basically take each one of those commercial corridors, do some sort of offset, and say any building that's not included fully within the zone would not be eligible. So essentially just eliminating anything that fronts North, Albion, Maine, and that's always been the basis of what we've talked about as a group.
Thank you. Sorry, Councilor McLean.
Yeah, I believe I brought up the market values of that particular building, not to pick on any
No, I
particular
know.
building. And I think Mr. Hogan at our last meeting was probably well aware that I'm not thrilled with this law. But, that and $5 will get you a cup of coffee. At this point, I do agree with everything that was said by Councilor Dombrowski. And it bothers me that 40A is working against 40B. But that being said, Mr. Hogan, since our last meeting and since you guys have had more meetings and more time to distill these regulations, et cetera, have you found that we might at all be able to ever benefit within the districts you're currently proposing from this 10% affordability that's in the regulation but not in the statute?
So what we determined is that on the basis of we could, if we decided to make it so it was a significantly more dense allowable by right than we thought was appropriate. Right now, with the 4 units that are allowed at by right, if you made it so in one of them had to be affordable, you're up at 25%, which everything that all the feedback we've gotten from the state indicates that they would view that as a major exceedance of the 10% limit and therefore would not be allowed under the law. So the answer is no from an affordability perspective. And I apologize, we should have mentioned this earlier because that's been a major component of this. Our perception is that affordability is not something, unless we wanted to have a significantly smaller district where you'd allow 10 units or more as of right, that's not something that we felt was appropriate for the neighborhood character that we're evaluating. And we thought that because of that, we elected to go with a more gentle density approach and exclude, unfortunately, that affordability requirement.
I see, and I agree. It seems to be a bit of a catch-22. Relative to Greenwood, I'm just curious, and I'm not great with this density business. Is it just that there wasn't enough housing around the Greenwood tracks? Is that what the problem was, or?
The parcel sizes are just too large, so you'd have to increase the number of units for every parcel to make that 15 units per acre. If you put the 2 maps like next to each other, Wakefield Station and Greenwood, you can see a huge difference in the sizes of the parcels. It's a lot tighter around the Wakefield Station area.
Okay, thank you.
Basically, Councilor McLean, every lot that is existing, you have to take as is. And so it doesn't matter if a lot is 1 acre or 100 acres. The way it's written is that each one of those only counts for 4 units because we're allowing 4 units per lot as of right.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. And just by way of comment, I would not be in favor of doing anything to extend 40A beyond 40A to Greenwood. Me personally, it's just one person's opinion on the council. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Just to clarify that, I think so at this point, we probably wouldn't, for compliance measures, be submitting anything for Greenwood to the state, and it would have nothing to do with the MBTA 40A communities, just the Wakefield Station. I think Jim was hoping for feedback as we're talking about the Greenwood Transit area. Is this group the appropriate party to be looking at Greenwood Station to see if we should be thinking about just a multifamily district down there?
Yeah, I understand. And
Okay.
whether appropriate or not, my feedback
Okay.
is that I wouldn't be thrilled with the idea, me personally.
Okay.
Regardless of who is proposing it, as of right, I don't want to extend any more than
Okay.
we have to under 48.
Thank
But that's just one person's opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the council? Councilor Dennehy.
Yes, I would agree that I'm not in favor of going outside of the compliance piece. One question I had is that, so these property units, so if say that my house is in this
Mhm.
designated area, when I sell my house, somebody can buy my house and change it from, knock my house down and then make it a 3-family. Is that?
It depends if it's, the minimum's 4,000 square feet, if your lot, depending if what the lot size is.
Yeah.
But yes.
As long as
ultimately.
my lot's 4,000 square feet.
You can fit all the other dimensional regulations.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Can go
Okay.
up to 4-family.
It can go up to 4-family.
Mhm.
Okay. And then I'm really happy. This was a great presentation, so thank you. It was really clear. It's 'cause it's super complicated, but you made it very easy to
Oh, good.
understand. And I think the balancing the density with the business is really important. So for me, it's all about community.
Mhm.
And I think the way that we build community is by having a vibrant downtown, because we don't want people just to be living in Wakefield and going to
Mhm.
work, getting on the commuter rail and going to Boston and then coming home.
Mhm.
We want places where people have parks and recreation
Mhm.
and being able to walk and bike and go to stores and restaurants and build community that way.
Mhm.
So I just want to again encourage that. And
Okay.
I know that this isn't about 40B but mixed use development, but I really do advocate along all of our downtown districts is building up there
Yes.
in
Mhm.
terms of super supportive of that. Oh, and then the parking. So the parking, I would be supportive of lowering those parking
Mhm.
ratios, but if you did that, the one thing is that we're doing that because we don't want people to have, we want to reduce the number of cars, right?
Mhm.
And we want people who are using mass transit or biking. So that's fine. But the thing, my fear is that people are going to then get around it by parking in on residential streets. So I'm wondering if we need to go to a resident parking permit, like for your street, that, you know what, if you live on this street, only the people who live on that street
Can
are
park.
allowed to park on that
Yeah.
street.
I know a few of our streets, and Steve can maybe help me out here, do have residential permit right in our downtown, correct?
We do for certain streets
Yeah.
around the train stations.
Yeah.
But
'Cause
not Main Street.
Yeah.
Not Main Street, yeah.
Not Main
Yeah.
Street, no.
I just think that for residential, I mean, the intent of it is to get fewer cars on the road, so we don't want people to be, just like, you know, that we have the no parking car zone around the
Mhm.
commuter rail, so.
Definitely take that in. Yeah, the parking has been the one that we've been going back and forth with. And the whole idea of the MBTA communities is to be building around
Yeah.
transit. So getting people away from cars. So that's a conversation
Mhm.
that we've continued to have and will continue to have.
It's a hard issue, and, you know, it's a hard issue, I think, because we sometimes make the assumption that people are working in Boston.
Mhm.
And we have such a vibrant 128 and 495 that a lot of people are working in, so.
Or working from home, so they might not need a car.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Going back to your commercial, having lively commercial districts for
Yeah.
them. Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions from the council? No? All right, seeing none, hopefully this feedback was also helpful.
Very helpful.
Thank you again, Ms. Kicken and Mr. Hogan, both of you and the committee for your work. I think we'll look forward to kind of continuing the discussion as we move ahead towards town meeting. I would echo the importance of making sure that we are collecting feedback from the community. I mean, you know, my fear is not having anything in place at the end of 2024 and finding ourselves out of compliance with the state. I think one of the things you've heard loud and clear from everyone on the council is that would be extraordinarily bad. for our communities. So making sure that we kind of get the public engaged and hopefully get to a successful outcome that we could be proud of at town meeting in the spring would be great.
Awesome. We can,
And notifying it that this is something that we have to do.
Yes.
It's not like our choice. It's something that we need. We don't have any choice.
yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I'm back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you.
All right, last but not
All
least.
right, let's see. This is fun. Not that this stuff is not funny and exciting, but I'm here also to present, and I have a PowerPoint too, but on what my title talks about. But all the things that we mentioned tonight do fall within the whole community and economic development, work that I do, and trying to better our community and as a whole. And so, again, Erin Kokinda. So I started this role back in November of 2020. I figure I'd give you an update of kind of, for the new counselors, I know I presented to a few of you right when I started about the whole community and economic development, but I thought I'd give you a nice brief overview of kind of where I came from. So I started here in November of 2020. Prior to that, I worked for a regional economic development organization. Prior to that, I worked for the city of Lowell in their economic development office. So economic development has been what I've been doing since I've graduated college, and very passionate about how we use economic development to drive community growth. And so I love how the two of these go together. So basically what my role, or what this department's role is to strategically position the town of Wakefield to compete regionally for economic development, shape its goal, strategy and goals, which has been done in many of these plans, Vision 2030, the master plan, there's always an economic development component, maintains and analyzes data reflecting the effectiveness of town activities and promotions, and aims to increase the town's commercial and industrial tax base. So services and initiatives that are supported by the office, or my office, is business and nonprofit support. I wanted to make sure I included nonprofit because I'm working daily with many of our nonprofit organizations. Commercial real estate searches and promotion of available space that may be available. Programming for business growth. Planning and housing efforts for the town. Marketing. Partnerships with regional stakeholders. That's been really key to me. I have a really great network of other community economic development and planners in the surrounding communities. Seek grant opportunities for economic growth, and event planning. So business and nonprofit support. I did kind of a quick list of the businesses and nonprofits I've supported. I've supported over 100 businesses since July 1, 2022. That's everything from site searches, connecting businesses with property owners, streamlining the permitting process. So if I'll get a call from a new business, they have a question of what needs to be done at the town level, I'll kind of direct them in the right way to go. For example, iFly, which going through the Zoning Board of Appeals process, help them to connect with conservation, help them to connect with, as well as the building department, to kind of get them on the right path. I want to go back to the site searches real quick. I worked really closely with Mary Lyon. They were looking to expand. Unfortunately, couldn't find a space that worked, but they stayed in town, which was fantastic. Just expanded their space, but we spent much time together looking for new space. Charlie's on Main, have been in constant communications with them to try to find them a new space, and fingers crossed, I think we'll have promising information soon. Copy Cakes, unfortunately, you probably heard the sad news that they'll be closing, but I worked really closely with them to try to find them the space in town, but it was nothing, it was more personal reasons from my understanding. And then another support, which I'm very overdue for, so I apologize, it's a newsletter to the businesses, but I try to make sure that I have information about grants that are going to be available to send out to them. And the organizations that I refer a lot of these businesses to, and who I learn a lot from, are the Wakefield Area Chamber of Commerce, great working relationship with John, the Massachusetts Office of Business Development. We worked really closely with them last year with our EDIP program with NaNoRamic, which you probably all remember. The Massachusetts Small Business Development Center, they're a free resource for businesses to go to get technical assistance, financial assistance, marketing. SCORE, that's actually retired CEOs that mentor small business owners. Entrepreneurship at Community Teamworks, they're wonderful. They kind of offer the services the Small Business Development Center does. Mass Hire Metro North career center, connected many of our businesses to them of staffing concerns that they've had. And then the Mass Growth Capital Corporation, you've probably seen their name. They have really been the financial arm for the state of any of these new grant programs that have come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. So commercial real estate support, Steve and I have been on many visits with some of our large commercial property owners, now called The Edge, but Edgewater Properties on Audubon Road. We have visited there quite a few times, so I connect with them, quite everything from small retail to these larger developments to kind of hear about what they have available, what their lease is, any concerns they may have with the town, who I can connect them with, and then ultimately get all the information I need to provide it to anyone that may be looking for space in town. Again, streamline the process in town and connect them with the correct town department on their concerns and questions. Edgewater, again, updating their signage, connected them with Gail, and made sure that they were following the right process when they wanted to update it. Also, property owner meetings to assist them in getting their space leased or purchased. Most recently, Smith's Drugs building, we met with Patricia, the owner of the building, Steve and I, a number of times. I'm sure that question will be brought up about that building, on how do we get that space filled, what her concerns are, what the town can be doing better to help fill that space, and what we have to offer. Connect them with the businesses, again, going back to the site searches. I attend site tours quite frequently and promote site listings. And then I promote town and state programs to help update and promote their property. And as many of you know, we have the Property Assess Clean Energy program that Victor and I worked on, known as PACE, to help commercial and industrial property owners finance energy improvements to their building. So programming for business growth, past initiatives I've worked on, a small business resource webinar, one of the first things I did in the height of the pandemic, let all the businesses know of all the great resources that are available to them. A digital marketing training and grant program in the spring of 2021. We had 6 businesses that took advantage of that and got up to $2,500 of grant funds to make digital and e-commerce improvements. Small Business Administration, Massachusetts Office of Business Development, and Wakefield Area Chamber of Commerce, that's a mouthful, office hours in the fall, winter of 2021. Again, still in the pandemic, trying to connect businesses to, the resources that are available. I had a business owner the most recently in the spring with Albion Street to discuss, again, our favorite thing tonight, parking, but also opened up the conversation to many different things, the needs and wants they have, connecting with other business owners. It was just a great networking opportunity. And then a scavenger hunt to local businesses that was part of a grant that we got spring of 2023. Future initiatives, we got an earmark for $100,000 to do a sign facade program, currently working on the program details for that. A window business support program, signage, I'm hoping to work with Jen McDonald to create some signage to go in some of our vacant storefronts. And I apologize if I'm talking so fast. I just feel all I've been doing is talking tonight, to let people know to call my office if they're looking to open a business in town, and I can point them in the right direction and connect them with our business owners, or property owners, I'm sorry. Another small business resource webinar, and then I found the Albion Street meeting. We left, I think people came in a little disgruntled. We left really positive with new connections, and I'd hope to make this a quarterly thing at different commercial districts around town.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in there. That was quite a jumping into the lion's den down there. But I think that the business owners have come to a much better understanding with each other and what we can do to help them. And I think we're open to some of the suggestions, and it's been pretty quiet on that front for a while.
And you just jinxed us. Right?
I just jinxed us. I'm sorry, but yeah.
No, and I think what was great too, a lot of businesses were able to talk to each other, that there might have been a little, I don't know. But they're like, you can park behind my building. I'm not there from 12 to 3, and vice versa. So it was a really positive, meeting. And I think, like Steve just said, we haven't heard anything, so I'll take it as a win. I'm also, I wear kind of this planning hat as well, but I think it ties in really nicely with that community economic development. Some past plans that I've worked on since I've started is a local rapid recovery program. This was a grant program through the state during the pandemic. I feel like I keep saying the pandemic, to help our commercial districts recover. So it gave us recommendations, one being a sign facade program, creative marketing strategies, and I'd like to say that we've already put a lot of those things in place, both between the sign facade program that we're going to be rolling out, as well as this creative shared local marketing that I got a grant for. So 2 grants working together. The Urban Land Institute, South Main. This is what I'm really excited about. The Urban Land Institute came at the beginning of 2021, did a whole study of our South Main Street area by the Ace Building, Sweet Bay, 500 Main Street. One of the recommendations was, you really could use some mixed-use multifamily. Well, what do we currently have in front of the ZBA, which is really exciting. And then, to reinvigorate this area while much is not going on is do some pop-ups and placemaking, which is currently what we have now. So we're really using these plans and taking them to heart and putting them into action, which is really exciting. And then Vision 2030, worked closely with many of you on this, went through and, we did a lot of things already that they've recommended, such as placemaking activities. Microtransit programming is called out in that as well, which also supports economic development, beginning stages of that, supporting our business community, and also mixed-use multifamily developments as well. Oh, again, 41. Housing. I feel like I speak to many of you about housing quite frequently, especially as of recent with the 240B proposals. But housing does play a role in my office. I don't want to say this out loud, but I will. I've come to enjoy housing. I probably shouldn't have said that. But we were just recently awarded a housing choice community, which is really exciting news. So we had to apply to become a housing choice community. And we will be one up until 2028. And we were designated that by creating a certain amount of housing units in the last 5 years and adopting best practices related to housing production. And we're one of only 95 Massachusetts communities that are part of this. And so what plays into that is our mixed-use multifamily overlay district, our parking. I'm totally blanking on a few other things I had to fill out. There was about 15 best practices, and we checked off a lot of them. Oh, accessory dwelling units, that we allow those even by special permits. So, but being designated, this allows us to have an opportunity for a lot more grants, which is not just towards housing. It's making improvements to our sidewalks. It's also there to advance sustainability, sustainable housing production. If you go through their website and you see what other communities have done, they've been able to apply for various grant opportunities that probably benefits housing but isn't directly tied to housing. Also, housing production plans have also been part of that list as well. So it's just another avenue for us to get some grant funds through the state. And it's not only that, but when we're applying for other grants, it's a nice thing to have in our toolbox. MBTA communities, I won't go into that. Subsidized housing inventory, constantly working with Steve on that, measures our community's stock of low and moderate income housing. And currently, this was in February of 2023, this number has definitely gone up because I've just submitted more information. We were at 8.71%, but that's the old census numbers. They still, I feel like every week I'm like, oh, it's going to be out in a few weeks, the new census numbers, and they haven't come out yet. So that could change our figures, but Steve and I were kind of putting in some numbers, and I think with the projects that have gone through the Zoning Board of Appeals, and other projects that have been approved, that we would still be above that 10% once everything's all said and done. And more than happy to have offline conversations about how those numbers come to be. Marketing and networking, work really closely with Jen on this. Last year we got the Mass Office of Travel and Tourism grant. Wakefield, everything you need within your reach. I share that with our property owners, our real estate folks. I should reshare it again with them. I've started working on a new digital marketing packet about Wakefield, gives you a high overview of what Wakefield has to offer, as well as, discusses demographics, new housing units. So kind of gives the new business that's coming in an idea of what we have going on in town. And I also attend a number of economic development brainstorming sessions with economic development directors in Massachusetts, 10 monthly calls with the new Secretary of Economic Development, attend regional economic developments events, specifically Middlesex Street Coalition, to learn about newest trends in real estate development and business environment, and more importantly, network about Wakefield. So placemaking. So going back to what we were discussing earlier, I thought this kind of fit in nicely with marketing and kind of what the grants we get. As if you haven't heard already or haven't seen, 500 Main Street, we were able to get a grant through the Massachusetts Office of Business Development, REDO, which is Regional Economic Development Organization grant. It was a partnership between the town of Wakefield, Middlesex Street Coalition, the Mass Innovation Network, and Up Next, who is the company that helped us get the storage units. So it activates these 2 mobile units to local emerging brands Two of the three are Wakefield based, one being the Boys and Girls Club, the other one being Uli Booley. And then a woman from Saugus, Pure Essentials, who does candles. And so the Boys and Girls Club, this is Steve said it best at the ribbon cutting. It's a perfect blend of a public, private, nonprofit partnership, between Bob Santinelli allowing us to use the space, the Boys and Girls Club looking to raise money for Inspire Cafe, which is, trying to get money to open kind of a Biddy and Bows and hopefully Wakefield run by individuals with diverse abilities. So they're selling slush, which I just went with my kids the other day, and it was great. And they said they get waves of, if the weather would be a little nicer, it might be a little better. But, and so, they're trying to raise money and they're using that avenue to do that. So that's really exciting. And then I also, tying into grants, I work closely with our engineering department to apply for grants pretty much yearly. Past grants we've received are MassWorks. That was the grant for the North Ave to do the water main improvements to support new development at 200 Quannapowitt and other development along North Ave. Urban Agenda Grant Program, $50,000 for the Wakefield Master Plan 2033. Potential grants I've applied for is a community planning grant for a housing production plan, MassWorks grant. This ties into our sidewalk connections from Tarrant Lane Apartments to the town sidewalk network. We've received grants for shared streets and spaces, activating our Greenwoods Commercial District, $115,000 for new sidewalks, wayfinding, and ADA compliant ramps, and then the $45,000 for the Shop Local campaign last year. And then I think this is my last one. Just so everyone can mark their calendars, me and Jen McDonald as well as many other people in town have become event planners as well. So we have our second annual Town Day, which just ties in very nicely again with community economic development. We had, I want to say, Chief Scory said around 3,000 people. I don't know, but we had it was very successful last year. The weather really helped. But we're going to be hosting our second annual event on October 7th at the Lower Common. We're going to be reaching out, we already have, to local businesses, nonprofits, and town committees to exhibit there. We'll have music, children activities, cornhole tournament, a beer garden, local food vendors, a scavenger hunt, which we thought would be really fun for kind of that middle-aged group. Are all tentatively part of the year's lineup. And this is, again, a great partnership between the town and other organizations like the Wakefield Area Chamber of Commerce. So please help us spread the word. Applications are now open. And I'm sorry, I went very fast, but I want to be mindful of your time. Any questions, feedback, and concerns? And again, my door is always open for referrals. Anyone that's looking to open a business or is having any issues or hear rumblings of someone that may be going out of the office or closing their doors, please send them my way. Thank you.
Thank you, and no apologies for going fast. We've kept you here for a long time tonight. Questions from the council? Councilor McLean?
Just real quickly, without getting into all the details, are you actively engaged with Boys and Girls Club regarding trying to find a location for Inspire?
Yes, so I have gone on a site tour with them. Adam and I talk quite frequently about trying to find space that will work with them. There's another space in town that they're trying to make sure that's ADA compliant if it would make sense for them. So always either CC'd on emails or attend site tours with them.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Councilor Dennehy?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You do a lot. It was very comprehensive. I have a question. When properties, is there a requirement for, I'd heard that there's some properties that are not ADA compliant. Don't all of our all the
for
property?
entrances, some of them, there could possibly be a step. They should, and then, there might be a ramp. They should be ADA compliant. A lot of the times, those buildings have been there for a long time, and there hasn't been a change of hands, and they don't make updates to the building. And Steve, please mistake me if I'm wrong, but some of them still need either like a ramp access or things like that to allow for all uses to get up.
And they're grandfathered in because
Well, they're not grandfathered. I shouldn't say that. They're just been in the same. There hasn't really been changes to the building, so I don't think there's anything from a town's perspective we can
can't do
enforce at
anything?
that time.
Well, they are, but I think grandfather is a better term to use. They've been there a long time. We really can't.
Until there's a change of ownership.
I don't think it's ownership. If you're talking about private property, I think it's whether there's a renovation of more than
Right.
25% of the
Oh,
value
okay.
of the property.
Yeah.
So it'd be,
Yeah.
that's what I thought, okay,
That's why some of these buildings on the second floor
yeah.
that are vacant, they're not being used because that same thing.
Yeah,
It's hard to put in an elevator.
right.
Think about above Public Kitchen, that block there. Beautiful units could be up there, I think.
Which I've been having wonderful conversations
With
with
the new
owner.
owners,
Yeah.
And there seems to be maybe more interest in taking that on.
That would be good. I mean,
Yes.
that's too bad that, businesses aren't accessible. Let's look into that. Okay, now I lost my train of thought, so I'll let others go.
Other questions for Erin? Councillor Butt.
So just thank you, Erin, for giving us so much time tonight. You've done great work through the pandemic, and now I actually was at Blue Moon yesterday and got some questions about some of the stuff in town, and I was like, I don't know, and before I could even say call Erin, she's like, I'll just call Erin.
Oh, no, that's great. Yeah.
So
Good.
expect a call, but I love that even down in Greenwood, like you've made
yes.
those connections. I really appreciate that. I loved Councillor Smith Galvin and I went to the pop-up on 4th of July. We got some great slush.
Oh, great.
We loved
Awesome.
talking to the manager and the workers there.
Was Tara working? I don't know. The manager,
I think
she's
it was
great.
Tara.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm trying to remember her name. So I love kind of actively helping and partnering with businesses that we want to bring here. The other aspect of this, and I would just love to, in a year, 6 months here, an update on this as you talk to some of other economic development, is one thing that everyone's impacted by is actually having a worker shortage and finding help at all our restaurants and coffee shops. And so, I mentioned this. How far, do we put something on our website of places that are hiring, or how do we help people find help? Because I know it's an issue at Chibo. A lot of places are closed on Mondays. And so would love to think about how economic development can help with
Absolutely.
job training or job, promotion, things like that.
Yeah. And I know that's conversations. Well, it's not funny to say that, but I actually got an email from the gentleman who does my job in Reading the other day saying, I had a business reach out to me. Who do you refer them to when they're looking for staffing? They're having staff shortages. And I always do, my first step is always the mass hire career centers, because that's what they're there for. They're trying to connect, businesses with people looking for employment. But we have had discussions in the past is, do we have some sort of employment training program? I don't know if that's through the town or working with another organization for some of the high school students to do some of the I don't want to downplay it, but some of the smaller things, so the business owners and the people that are taking orders have more time to do more marketing and things like that right now they maybe don't have the time for, or just trying to get by. And so something we've discussed in the past, but definitely would love to continue that conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say that Erin does a great job, and we work very closely. And I'm glad you learned to love housing.
Against my own, yeah.
But I think you're seeing real progress and a real connection with the business and the nonprofit community, and that's really great. Yeah, the town.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
I think
you
we've
so
seen tonight
much.
just the sheer breadth of what you do in your role, and how critical it is to so many parts of the town, both planning but also sort of the day-to-day vibrancy of our community.
Yes.
So appreciate you being here, taking the time. I hope we've blown far enough past
God, I
bedtime
hope
that you get to
so.
go home
I hope so.
and, kick back. Just circle the neighborhood if it looks like anyone's away.
Right.
But
It was so great seeing you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh,
Take
and please
care.
spread the word about Town Day. Thank
Yeah.
you.
absolutely.
If we haven't, Dad hasn't done his job.
Yeah,
Dad is in
exactly.
big trouble, having been there.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Item number 7, we have an appointment for a student representative to the Human Rights Commission. Do I have a motion?
Move to appoint,
Vanessa Westlake.
thank you, Vanessa Westlake to the student, help me out here.
The student representative
Student
to the Human
representative.
Rights Commission.
As student representative to the Human Rights Commission.
All
I
right.
think I got it out.
Second.
Okay.
Yes.
Any discussion?
Just adding that I think Vanessa's the current represented, or was last year as well, right?
I'm not sure. She
I-
she was recommended
know
by the school department.
Yes, she was. I believe she did it last year.
She wasn't, no, yeah,
she
she
wasn't?
wasn't.
Oh, okay.
No, no, yep.
Then she was a super volunteer, so that's great.
Other comments? All right, hearing none, the motion is to appoint Vanessa Westlake as the student representative to the Human Rights Commission. We'll take a roll call vote. Counselor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Counselor Danahy,
Yes.
Counselor Vincent,
Yes.
Counselor Smith-Galvin,
Yes.
Counselor McLean,
Yes?
Counselor Butt,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Motion passes 7-0. Item number 8, approval of minutes. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of our last meeting.
Yes, June 26th.
Thank you, June 26, 2023.
And I will second that.
All right. Any discussion or any objection? All right, hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent.
I abstain.
Oh, thank you. So approved 6-0 with one abstention from Counselor Danahy. All right, item number 9, announcements. Counselor Dombrowski, I think is, I
Thank
can't
you,
tell
Mr.
if your
Chairman. I just
hand's
wanted
up.
to give
It's in the
a-
very top corner.
Yeah, yeah, I know it's very small. I wanted to just give a quick shout out to the Wakefield Independence Day Committee for another incredible parade this year. I wanted to also recognize the Westside Social Club for the incredible work that they do from morning literally until evening. And I know that there's just so much effort that goes in across the board with so many volunteers within our community. Also, our police department for having the entire department on the 4th of July. I know that's no easy feat. Fire, DPW. There's just a lot of really committed folks who make the 4th of July just an incredible day and night in Wakefield. And I know we are the envy of so many other communities, and with good reason. And I also want to finally shout out to the Wakefield Warriors football team. And our state champs are also proudly in the parade as well. It's great seeing them. So just a great day for Wakefield, and glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Other announcements? All right, just a couple of quick things to mention. The town council will be having office hours at the farmers market on Saturday the 22nd from 9 to 1, so please come by and hopefully you'll see many of us there. We are also seeking applicants for the Finance Committee. So information about that is available on the website. Encourage people to apply to that. As one of, I think, 3 former FinCom members on the town council, we can vouch for the fact that that's a great way to volunteer and serve the community. And so it would be exciting to see folks apply for that. And then finally, just wanted to highlight, thanks to our hosts from WCAT, Movies by the Lake starts this week. So just another great summer activity to be able to enjoy here in Wakefield. Any other announcements, Mr. Mayo, from you? Or
No, I was going to say that I'm going to be away for the next few days, family vacation, and my light reading, if I get any light reading, is a book by Henry Grabar, and the title is Paved Paradise, How Parking Explains the World. And I think that was very appropriate with some of the discussions that we had tonight. So, but it does talk about parking, so I thought it was kind of interesting. Thank you.
even on vacation, we know
I
you're
know.
still sort
Well, I
of
think
working.
I found it very interesting. I'll have a yellow marker, so it'll be fine.
Great. All right, seeing no other announcements, we'll move on to item 11, adjournment. Our next town council meeting will be on Monday, August 14th, just about a month from today, at 7 p.m. I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Seconded.
Second, great. Any discussion or objection? Well, hearing none, motion to adjourn is approved by unanimous consent. Thank you very much for joining us. Enjoy the month, and we'll see you in August.